For 22 months, every job interview ended with a rejection, almost as if the entire town had secretly agreed I was a thief. I thought it was just bad luck until a hiring manager finally looked me in the eye and told me to ask my father why I was unhirable. I believed hitting rock bottom was scrubbing floors at a roadside motel, but I had no idea my grandmother had left a sealed letter 15 years ago specifically for this moment. My name is Jean Webb. I am 29 years old. By all reasonable metrics, I should be sitting in a mid-level management office right now, perhaps overseeing a quarterly audit or managing a portfolio of high-yield corporate accounts. I graduated magna cum laude. I passed my CPA exams on the first attempt, a feat that usually takes people years of agonizing study and repeated failures. I have a mind that does not just see numbers. I see the stories they tell. I see where the money bleeds, where it hides, and where it grows. I am overqualified for 90% of the jobs I apply for and perfectly qualified for the rest. And yet, for the last 22 months, I have been arguably the most unemployable accountant in the state. If you looked at my resume, you would see a clean, sharp trajectory of academic excellence followed by a gaping, infected wound of a gap year that has stretched into nearly 2 years. If you looked at my bank account, you would see that I have exactly $42.12 to my name. If you looked at my hands, you would see the dry, cracked skin from the industrial cleaning chemicals I use at the motel where I work the graveyard shift, scrubbing evidence of other people's bad decisions out of cheap carpet. But right now, I was not looking at my hands. I was looking up. The Sterling and Vance Financial Tower was a monolith of steel and tempered glass that seemed to pierce the gray city sky. It was the kind of building that made you feel small just by standing in its shadow. It was a cathedral of capitalism, a place where fortunes were made in the blink of an eye and lost just as quickly. It was also the last place on earth I expected to be invited. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a violent, jarring vibration that made my heart hammer against my ribs. I did not need to look at the screen to know who it was. But I looked anyway. Grant, my brother. The message was short, brutal, and devoid of any sibling affection. Dad called, "You are done." I stared at the screen, the white letters blurring slightly as my vision swam. I could hear Grant's voice in my head as I read it. That smug, self-assured tone he had perfected since we were children. He was not warning me. He was taunting me. He was telling me that the net had been cast. The trap had been sprung, and I was foolish for thinking I could swim out to deep water. Before I could lock the screen, the phone rang. The screen displayed a generic contact name. Home. It was not home. It was a command center. It was a courtroom where I was always the defendant and the judge was the man on the other end of the line. I should have let it go to voicemail. I should have thrown the phone into the nearest trash can and walked away. But conditioning is a powerful thing. When Raymond Webb calls, the world stops. I slid my thumb across the screen and brought the phone to my ear. But I did not speak. I just listened to the breathing on the other end, steady and calm. "I hear you are in the city, Jean," my father said. His voice was not loud. Raymond Webb never raised his voice. He did not have to. He spoke with the quiet, terrifying confidence of a man who knows he owns the ground you are standing on. "I have an interview," I said. My voice sounded thin, brittle, like dry leaves stepping on pavement. "No," he corrected me gently, as if explaining to a toddler why they cannot touch the stove. "You have a waste of time. I already made the call. Jean, I spoke to their HR director 10 minutes ago. We had a lovely chat about your history." I felt the blood drain from my face. I gripped the strap of my purse so hard my knuckles turned white. "This is a global firm. Dad, you don't know them." "I know everyone, Jean, or I know someone who knows someone. The world is much smaller than you think, especially when you carry the reputation I gave you." He paused, letting the silence stretch out, letting the weight of his influence settle on my shoulders. "It is embarrassing. You know, my daughter, wandering around the city in a cheap suit, begging for scraps. It looks bad for the family." I am trying to survive, I whispered. You are trying to run, he said. And you are tired. I can hear it in your voice. You are tired of the rejection. You are tired of the motel. You are tired of pretending you are something you are not. I am an accountant, I said, though the conviction was fading. You are a liability, he shot back, the warmth vanishing from his tone. But you can be useful again. Just come home. Jean, the office is a mess without you. Grant cannot handle the books the way you do. Come home, sign the papers, do your job, and everything will be smooth again. I will make the calls stop. I will clear your name. You can have your life back. It was the same offer he had made a dozen times. Come back, submit, be the accessory to his fraud, be the shield he uses to protect Grant and himself. And if I don't, I asked, then you keep cleaning toilets, he said simply, and every time you think you have found a door that is open, I will be there to lock it before you can even reach the handle. Do not embarrass yourself by walking into that building. Jean, go to the bus station. Come home. The line went dead. I stood there on the busy sidewalk, the noise of the city rushing around me like a river. Sirens, car horns, the chatter of pedestrians, it all blurred into white noise. The only thing I could hear was the echo of his voice. I already made the call. He had done it again. He had poisoned the well before I could even take a sip. I looked at the revolving doors of the Sterling and Vance building. I saw men and women in tailored suits walking in and out, radiating purpose and security. They belonged there. I was a fraud in a $30 blazer I had bought at a thrift store. Trying to hide the smell of desperation. I should turn around. That was the logical thing to do. If Raymond Webb said he had killed this opportunity, then it was dead. Walking in there now would just be subjecting myself to another humiliation, another polite but firm dismissal, or worse. Another security guard escorting me out because we don't hire thieves. But then I thought about the motel. I thought about the way the manager looked at me when I asked for an advance on my paycheck. I thought about the gray, suffocating walls of my childhood bedroom that my father wanted to force me back into, if I was going to be rejected. I wanted to hear it to my face. I wanted to look them in the eye when they told me I was broken. I shoved the phone into my pocket and walked toward the doors. The lobby was a cavern of marble and light. The air smelled of expensive coffee and floor wax. It was cool, almost cold, a stark contrast to the humid city air outside. I walked to the reception desk, my heels clicking loudly on the polished stone. Every step felt like an act of defiance. The receptionist was a woman who looked like she had been carved out of ice and draped in silk. She did not look up as I approached. She was typing something on a sleek, silver keyboard, her manicured fingers moving at lightning speed. "Name?" she asked, without stopping her typing. "Jean Webb," I said. "I have an interview at 10:30. I waited for the pause. I waited for her to stop typing, frown, look at her screen, and then give me that pitying look I had come to know so well. "Oh, Ms. Webb, I am so sorry, but the position has been filled," or "Ms. Webb, unfortunately, your appointment was canceled." She stopped typing. She looked up. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and completely unreadable. She scanned my face, then looked down at her screen. She tapped a single key. "Ms. Webb," she said. Her voice was not dismissive. It was alert. "You are early." "I can wait," I said quickly. "I know I am early. I just wanted to be sure." "No need," she interrupted. She stood up. It was a gesture of respect that caught me off guard. Receptionists did not stand up for junior analyst candidates. They barely made eye contact. "Mr. Lang is available now. He asked to be notified the second you arrived." I froze. The name hung in the air like a thunderclap. "Mr. Lang?" I repeated. "You mean, Victor Lang?" "The CEO." "Yes," she said, gesturing toward a bank of private elevators at the far end of the hall. "He is expecting you on the 45th floor. Security has already cleared you. Here is your pass." She handed me a sleek black plastic card with a gold chip embedded in it. I took it, my fingers trembling slightly. "There must be a mistake," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. I applied for the junior financial analyst position. That is usually handled by HR or a department head. The receptionist smiled, but it was a tight, professional smile that gave nothing away. There is no mistake, Ms. Webb. Mr. Lang handles his own schedule, and he was very specific. He wants to see you personally. I stared at her, my mind racing to find a logical foothold. CEOs of multi-billion-dollar financial firms do not interview junior accountants. They do not even know junior accountants exist. They certainly do not clear their schedules to meet with a 29-year-old woman with a blacklisted reputation and a gap in her resume the size of the Grand Canyon. Unless my father was right. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I already made the call. He had said, maybe he had not just called HR. Raymond Webb was a big fish in a small pond, but he had an ego that could swallow the ocean. Maybe he had called the top. Maybe he had spun such a horrific story about me, painted me as such a dangerous criminal or a pathological liar, that the CEO himself wanted to see the freak show. Maybe I was not here for an interview. Maybe I was here to be made an example of. Ms. Webb? The receptionist prompted. The elevator is waiting. Right, I said. Thank you. I turned and walked toward the elevators. My legs felt heavy, like I was walking through water. I clutched the visitor pass in my hand, the sharp edges digging into my palm. As the elevator doors slid shut, cutting off the noise of the lobby and sealing me into the silent, rising box, I closed my eyes. I leaned my head back against the cool metal wall and let out a breath I'd been holding since I got out of bed that morning. How did it come to this? I thought about the last 22 months. I thought about the first interview I failed, at a local bank in my hometown. I had walked in confident, smiling, my portfolio tucked under my arm. The manager had smiled back, shaken my hand, and told me I was exactly what they were looking for. Then, 2 days later, a generic email. We have decided to move in a different direction. Then it happened again, and again. At first, I thought it was just the job market. It was competitive. I told myself to work harder. I rewrote my resume until every bullet point shone. I practiced my interview answers in the mirror until I sounded like a corporate robot. I bought books on body language. I learned to smile with my eyes, but the rejections kept coming. And they started getting stranger. There was the accounting firm in the next county where the interviewer had looked at my last name, frowned, and asked, Webb? Any relation to Raymond Webb Construction? When I said yes, the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. The interview ended 5 minutes later. There was the insurance company where the hiring manager had actually laughed. A short, cruel bark of a laugh. When I asked about background checks, Don't worry about that, honey, he had said. We know all about you. And finally, the breaking point. The HR manager at a mid-sized logistics company 3 towns over. She was a kind woman, older, with pictures of her grandchildren on her desk. We had connected. I felt it. I knew I had the job. And then, at the very end, she had received a phone call. I watched her face change. I watched the kindness drain out and be replaced by something else. Fear. She had hung up the phone and looked at me with sad, pitying eyes. You should ask your father, she had said, her voice barely a whisper. Ask him why everyone is afraid to hire you. That was the day I realized I wasn't fighting bad luck. I was fighting a curse. And now, here I was, shooting upward at 20 feet per second toward the office of one of the most powerful men in the financial world, carrying that curse with me. My father had said I was done. He said he had made the call. If I walked into that office and Victor Lang told me to get out, if he told me that a thief had no place in his building, it would be the end. I would not have the strength to try again. I would have to go back. I would have to go home and sign the papers and let my father win. I opened my eyes as the elevator dinged softly. The digital display read 45. The doors opened. But to understand why I stepped out of those doors, and to understand why I am about to tear my family's legacy down to the bedrock, I have to tell you the truth. I have to tell you what happened before the interviews, before the motel, and before the silence. I have to tell you how my parents decided to turn their own daughter into a criminal to save their son. To understand the present, you have to look at the ledger of the past. You have to audit the transactions of affection and value that occurred inside the house where I grew up. In the town of Oak Haven, the Webb family was not just a household. We were a local institution. My father, Raymond Webb, owned Webb Custom Foundations, a company that poured the concrete basements for nearly half the residential homes in the county. His trucks were everywhere, white pickups with bold blue lettering that promised strength and stability. That was the brand. Solid, reliable, unshakable. My mother, Elaine, was the public relations department of our family life. She curated our existence with the same terrifying precision my father applied to his construction sites. Every Sunday, we sat in the front pew of the church, dressed in clothes that were always clean, always pressed, and always slightly uncomfortable. We were the portrait of the American dream, a family that smiled in unison and never, ever aired dirty laundry. But inside that house, the economy of love was rigged. I learned very early on that there were two classes of citizens in the Webb household. There was the heir, and there was the help. Grant was 2 years older than me. He was loud, charismatic in a clumsy sort of way, and remarkably average in every measurable metric. He struggled with basic algebra. He quit the varsity football team because the coach was too hard on him, a narrative my father readily accepted. Yet, Grant was treated like a prince in waiting. He was the sun around which my parents orbited. If Grant got a C on a history test, my mother would bake a pie to comfort him, and my father would grumble about the school system's unreasonable standards. Then there was me. I was the quiet one, the one who understood that the only way to avoid criticism was to be perfect, and the only way to avoid neglect was to be useful. I brought home report cards with straight A grades, year after year. I won the state spelling bee in the 5th grade. I organized the school charity drive. My parents' reaction to my achievements was always the same. A brief, distracted nod. It was the kind of reaction you give to a toaster that toasts bread. It is doing what it is supposed to do. Why should it be applauded? That is nice, Jean, my mother would say, usually while looking over my shoulder to see what Grant was doing. Make sure you help your brother with his homework later. He has a big week coming up. The dinner table was the boardroom where these dynamics played out every single night. It was a ritual. My father sat at the head, still wearing his work shirt, but with his hands scrubbed clean of concrete dust. My mother sat to his right, Grant sat to his left, and I sat opposite my father, at the far end, adjacent to the kitchen door, so I could easily get up to refill water glasses or fetch the salt. I remember one dinner vividly. It was the spring of my junior year in high school. I had just received my acceptance letter to a prestigious summer program for young mathematicians. It was a big deal, the kind of thing that usually gets your picture in the local paper. I had left the letter on the center of the table, hoping it would spark a conversation. My father moved the letter aside so he could set down the platter of roast chicken. "Grant," my father boomed, carving the bird with focused intensity. "I saw the truck today. You scratched the bumper again." Grant shrugged, shoveling mashed potatoes into his mouth. "It was the parking lot at the cinema. The spaces are too tight. It is a design flaw." "Dad, I have told you to back in," my father said, but there was no anger in his voice, only a mild, indulgent annoyance. "You have to be aware of your perimeter. You are going to be running crews one day. You cannot be careless with equipment." I know, Grant mumbled. "I will fix it." "See that you do," my father said. He placed a large, juicy piece of white meat on Grant's plate. Then he served my mother. Finally, he served himself. I waited. The platter was now mostly bones and smaller cuts. I reached out and served myself silently. "Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "did you see the letter?" My father looked up, blinking as if he had forgotten I was there. "The what?" "The letter, under the chicken platter. I got into the governor's math academy for the summer. Only 30 students were picked from the whole state. My mother smiled, a thin, reflex action that didn't reach her eyes. That sounds like a lot of work. Jean, you will be gone for 6 weeks? Who is going to help me with the garden? It is a scholarship. Mom, I said. It is for my future. My father chewed slowly, swallowing before he spoke. He looked at me with a gaze that was not unkind, but heavy with a stifling, patronizing weight. John, honey, he said, pointing his fork at me, it is good that you are smart. We are proud of that. But you have to be careful. You do not want to become too intense. Intense? I asked. I want to be successful. Success for a man is conquering the world, my father lectured, pouring gravy over his potatoes. Success for a woman is stability. You want a nice job? Sure, something in an office, air-conditioned, safe. But you do not need to be chasing trophies. It makes you look hard. Men do not like hard women. Employers do not like women who try to run the show. You just need to be steady. Don't overdo it. Don't overdo it. That was the motto engraved on my life. Be smart, but not too smart. Be capable, but do not threaten the men. Be there, but do not be loud. Grant smirked at me across the table. Yeah, Jean, don't be a nerd. You will never get a boyfriend if you are doing calculus all summer. Enough, my mother said softly. Jean, please clear the salad bowls. Grant needs more room. I stood up and took the bowls. I felt a burning sensation in my chest, a mixture of shame and fury. I looked at my brother, who was already failing remedial math, being groomed to take over $1 million business. I looked at my father, who saw my ambition as a character flaw. I realized then that I could never earn their respect with compliance. I had to earn it with power. And in the world I saw, power was not muscles or concrete. Power was money. Power was understanding where the money came from and where it went. That was why I chose accounting and finance. It wasn't a passion for numbers. It was a passion for indisputable truth. In accounting, things balanced or they did not. There was no, Grant is the favorite, so he gets a pass. In finance, the bottom line did not care about your gender or your feelings. I wanted to speak the language that my father feared, the language of profit, loss, and audit. But there was one person who saw me, one person who didn't look at me and see a supporting character. My grandmother, Evelyn Hart. Evelyn was my mother's mother, but the two women could not have been more different. My mother was soft, pliable, and desperate to please. Evelyn was made of flint and steel. She lived in a small, immaculate house on the edge of town, and she had a reputation for being difficult, which I learned simply meant she was a woman who refused to be cheated. She had inherited a modest sum from her husband decades ago and, through shrewd investments that nobody in the family quite understood, had turned it into a comfortable independence. She didn't discuss her money. She just lived with a quiet, terrifying dignity, while my parents fawned over Grant. I would escape to Grandma Evelyn's house. It was a sanctuary. The air there smelled of lavender and old paper. She didn't ask me to bake or clean. She asked me to read. She would put her reading glasses on the end of her nose and spread out documents on her kitchen table. Stock reports, tax filings, legal contracts. Come here, Jean, she would say, her voice rasping from years of smoking menthol cigarettes. Look at this. Tell me what you see. At first, I saw only gibberish, columns of numbers, dense paragraphs of legal jargon. It is boring, Grandma, I would complain. It is only boring because you do not know how to read the story, she would snap back, tapping a long, manicured fingernail on the page. This line here, this deduction, that is a lie. They are hiding profit to lower their tax burden. And this clause here, that is a trap. If you sign this, you give away your right to sue. She taught me to look past the totals. She taught me to look for the anomalies. She taught me that the person who writes the contract controls the relationship, and the person who audits the books holds the leash. Men like your father, she told me once, taking a sip of bitter black tea. They think they build the world because they pour the cement. They are wrong. The world is built on paper. If you control the paper, you control the concrete. I loved her for that. She made me feel powerful. She made me feel like my brain was a weapon I was sharpening. But I did not realize how closely she was watching my parents until the summer I turned 14. It was a humid August afternoon. I was sitting on her porch, reading a book, while she rocked in her chair, watching the heat rise off the pavement. My father's truck had just driven by. Grant in the passenger seat, both of them laughing, ignoring us completely. Evelyn watched them pass, her eyes narrowing into slits. She did not look like a grandmother then. She looked like a hawk spotting a field mouse. She reached out and took my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Her skin cool and dry like parchment paper. "Jean," she said. She waited until I looked her full in the face. Her eyes were a pale, piercing blue. "You are a good girl. You are smart. You are honest. In this town. Those are dangerous things to be." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Your father," she said, choosing her words with slow deliberation, "is a man who builds things on sand. He thinks if the house is big enough, no one will notice the foundation is cracking. And your mother, she is too afraid of the rain to fix the roof." She squeezed my hand harder. It almost hurt. "Listen to me. One day, they are going to need someone to blame. Weak people always need a scapegoat when the walls start to buckle, and because you are the strong one, and because you are the one they do not value, they will try to put the weight on you." I shook my head, confused. "Dad loves me, Grandma. He is just old-fashioned." "He loves himself," she corrected me. "And he loves the image of himself. Never confuse the two." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper, though we were the only ones there. "I have made preparations. I have watched how they treat you. I have watched how they spoil that boy and ignore you. I have seen the way your father looks at rules like they are suggestions." She let go of my hand and tapped her temple. "I am old, Jean, but I am not blind. I have set something aside, not for them, for you. But you cannot have it yet. You need to be ready." "Ready for what?" "For the day they corner you," she said. "If you are ever backed against a wall, if you ever feel like they have taken everything from you and you have nowhere to go, you find the door I left. You will know it when you see it. But until then, you keep your eyes open, you learn the numbers, and you never, ever sign anything without reading it 3 times. I nodded, though I did not truly understand. At 14, you cannot imagine your parents as villains. You can imagine them as annoying, or strict, or unfair, but not as enemies. I thought she was just being dramatic. A senile old woman holding on to grudges against a son-in-law she didn't like. I did not know that she was the only person in the world who saw the tragedy coming. I did not know that while I was trying to earn my father's love, she was building me a life raft for the moment he would try to drown me. I went back to reading my book, and she went back to rocking in her chair. But the seed was planted, and years later, when the sky finally fell, her voice would be the only thing I could hear. But back then, I just wanted to be an accountant. I just wanted to go to college, get a degree, and prove them wrong. I thought if I became successful enough, my father would finally look at me with the same pride he saved for Grant. I was naive. I thought competence was a currency they would accept. I did not realize that in the Webb family, competence was a threat, and loyalty was a suicide pact. The years passed. I went to university. I excelled. I came home for holidays and saw the cracks Evelyn had warned me about, but I chose to ignore them. Grant was barely scraping by in the family business, making mistakes that my father covered up with cash and bluster. The tension in the house was growing, the air getting thinner. Then came the year I graduated, the year I came home with my degree, ready to start my life. The year my father sat me down at that same dining table and asked me for a small favor, and just like that, the trap that had been set since I was a child finally snapped shut. It was the spring of my senior year at university when the request came, I was weeks away from graduation, riding high on a wave of academic adrenaline and the naive belief that the hardest part of my life, the exams, the thesis defense, the sleepless nights, was behind me. I had come home for a long weekend to pick up some winter clothes I had left in storage and to endure the requisite family dinner. I expected the usual dynamic. Grant would talk about his weekend plans, Mom would talk about the weather, and Dad would talk about how the government was ruining small businesses. I would eat my peas and say nothing. But that Friday evening, my father surprised me. He poured me a glass of wine. He never poured me wine. He usually claimed that alcohol made women loose and sloppy, but tonight, he filled the glass to the brim with a rich, dark Cabernet. "Jean," he said, settling into his leather armchair with a sigh that sounded almost weary, "I have been thinking. You are about to graduate with all these fancy honors. You have a head for numbers that I will admit I never had. Grant is good with people, but he gets a headache looking at a balance sheet." I sat up straighter. It was the first time he had ever openly acknowledged Grant's deficiency in front of me. "The business is growing," he continued, swirling his glass. "We are taking on some big municipal contracts. The paperwork is becoming a nightmare. Our current bookkeeper, Mrs. Gable, is getting old. She is missing things. I need someone I can trust to take a look at the books before we close the fiscal year. Someone family." He looked at me then, and his eyes were warm. For 22 years, I had starved for that warmth. It was intoxicating. "Would you help your old man out?" he asked. "Just for a few weeks, sort out the mess. Call it an internship. I will pay you. Of course." I agreed immediately. I would have done it for free. I would have paid him for the privilege of finally being treated like a partner instead of a parasite. The next Monday, I set up a temporary workspace in the back office of Webb Custom Foundations. It was a cramped, windowless room that smelled of stale coffee and copier toner. Stacks of invoices were piled on the desk like leaning towers of Pisa. Filing cabinets overflowed with yellowing paper. It was chaotic. But to me, it was a puzzle waiting to be solved. For the first 3 days, I felt useful. I organized the filing system. I digitized the receipts. I reconciled the petty cash fund, which was off by $300, mostly lunches Grant had charged to the company card, but I let that slide. It was standard nepotism, annoying but not illegal. But on the 4th day, I started digging into the vendor payments. Grandma Evelyn's voice echoed in my head. "Look for the anomalies. Look for the story the numbers are trying to hide." I was cross-referencing material costs for a large residential project in the North County. The concrete pour had been completed 6 months ago. The invoices were all paid, but as I scrolled through the digital ledger, something caught my eye. There was a payment of $12,000 to a company called Redstone Aggregates, LLC. 3 lines down, there was another payment of $12,000 to Redstone Aggregate, Inc. The names were almost identical. The amounts were exactly the same, but the invoice numbers were non-sequential. And when I pulled the physical files, the addresses were different. The first company was a well-known supplier in the state capital. The second company listed its address as a P.O. box in a town 2 hours south, a town where my father's brother-in-law lived. I frowned and kept digging. Once I saw the pattern, I could not unsee it. It was everywhere. Duplicate payments for lumber that was never delivered. Consulting fees paid to shell companies that had no website and no phone number. Equipment rental charges for machinery the company already owned. It was not just bad bookkeeping, it was systematic siphoning. Money was bleeding out of the legitimate business accounts and disappearing into these ghost entities. And the terrifying part was that the total amount was staggering. We were talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars over the last 2 years. My stomach churned. I felt physically ill. I sat back in the creaky office chair, my hands trembling. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I was reading it wrong. Maybe this was some complex tax strategy I didn't understand yet. Maybe Dad didn't know. Maybe Grant was doing this behind his back, or Mrs. Gable was stealing from them. I had to tell him. He would want to know, if I brought this to him. I would be saving the company. I would be the hero. I printed out the spreadsheet, highlighting the suspicious transactions in neon yellow. I gathered the physical invoices. I prepared my presentation like I was defending a thesis. I waited until everyone had gone home except for my father. He was in his main office, reviewing blueprints for a new shopping center. I knocked on the doorframe. "Dad?" I said. "Do you have a minute?" "For you? Always," he said, not looking up from the blueprints. "How is the cleanup going? Did you find Mrs. Gable's stash of romance novels?" I walked in and closed the door behind me. The click of the latch sounded incredibly loud in the empty building. I placed the stack of papers on his desk. "I found some discrepancies," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Actually, I found a lot of them. There are duplicate payments here. Dad, thousands of dollars going to vendors that look like duplicates of real suppliers. I think someone might be stealing from you." My father stopped moving. He did not look at the papers. He slowly took off his reading glasses and folded them on the desk. "Stealing," he repeated, testing the word. "Yes," I said, gaining confidence. "Look at this. Redstone aggregates. You paid them twice for the same order. But the money went to 2 different bank accounts, and here, these consulting fees to a JG Partners. There is no contract for them. It adds up to over $50,000 just this quarter." I waited for his outrage. I waited for him to jump up, grab the phone, and call the police or his lawyer. Instead, he sighed. It was a long, disappointed exhale. "John," he said, his voice dropping an octave, "you are looking at things you do not understand." "I understand numbers," I insisted. "These numbers do not balance." "This is construction," he said dismissively. "It is a cash business. Sometimes we have to move things around to keep the liquidity flowing. Sometimes we pay people in ways that keep the job moving faster than the banks allow. It is how the world works. This isn't liquidity. Dad, this is fraud. If the IRS audits you—" "Stop," he said. It wasn't a shout. It was a command. "Do not use that word." He stood up and walked around the desk. He leaned against the edge of it, towering over me. The warmth was gone from his eyes. It was replaced by a cold, calculating assessment. "I told you to clean up the books," he said softly. "I did not tell you to conduct a forensic investigation. You are acting like a cop. John, it is unbecoming." "I am acting like an accountant," I shot back. "You asked for my help, and you are not helping," he said. "You are making trouble. You are looking for problems where there are none because you want to prove how smart you are. You want to show off your fancy degree? I am trying to protect you." He laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Protect me? I built this from nothing. I do not need protection from my own daughter." He turned back to his desk and opened a drawer. He pulled out a thick manila envelope and tossed it onto the desk surface. It landed with a heavy thud. "If you really want to help," he said, tapping the envelope, "you will handle this. We have a new compliance requirement for the financing on the Riverdale project. The bank needs a designated financial officer to sign off on the historic cost allocations. Since you are so worried about the books, you can take responsibility for them." I looked at the envelope. I looked at him. "What is this?" I asked. "It is a job offer," he said. "Formalized. You sign this. You become the Director of Internal Control. You get a salary, you get a title, and you certify that the books for the last 3 years are in order so we can get the loan." I reached for the envelope. My hands were shaking. I opened it and pulled out the document. It was a legal affidavit. I scanned the legalese, my heart hammering against my ribs. The undersigned acknowledges full review of all financial records, assumes personal liability for the accuracy of all prior reporting, indemnifies the principals against errors and omissions. I froze. He wasn't offering me a promotion. He was offering me a noose. If I signed this, I would be retroactively validating every fraudulent transaction I had just found. I would be stating, under penalty of perjury, that those fake invoices were real, and if, when, the house of cards collapsed, or when the IRS finally came knocking. My father and Grant would be clean. They could point to this piece of paper and say, "We didn't know. Jean was the director of internal control. She signed off on it. It was her." He was looking for a patsy, and he had chosen me. I looked up at him, feeling like I had been punched in the gut. "You want me to take the fall," I whispered. "I want you to be part of the family," he corrected. "Families help each other carry the load." "This isn't a load," I said, my voice rising. "This is a crime. You are asking me to go to jail for you." "Do not be dramatic," he snapped. "Nobody is going to jail. It is just paper. It keeps the bank happy. It keeps the business running so your brother has a future, so your mother has a house." "I won't do it," I said. I dropped the papers back onto the desk as if they were burning hot. "I won't sign this." My father's face hardened into stone. "Elaine," he called out. I turned around. I had not heard the door open, but my mother was standing there. She was wearing her coat, her purse clutched tightly in both hands. She had been waiting in the hallway. She had heard everything. "Mom," I said, pleading. "Did you hear him? He wants me to sign a fraudulent affidavit." My mother looked at me. Her eyes were wet, but her face was blank. She looked at my father, then back to me. "Jean," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Please, your father is under a lot of pressure. The business is fragile right now. If we do not get this loan, things could get very difficult." "So you know?" I asked, incredulous. "You know he's cooking the books?" "We do what we have to do," she said, reciting a line she must have told herself 1,000 times. "We survive. Why can't you just do this one thing? Grant would do it." "Then let Grant sign it," I screamed. "Grant cannot sign it," my father cut in smoothly. "Grant does not have a CPA license pending. Grant does not have the credibility. You do." It hit me then with the force of a physical blow. That was why they had encouraged my studies. That was why they had paid for my college. Not so I could succeed, but so I could be a qualified sacrifice. They had fattened me up with education just to slaughter me on the altar of the family business. "No," I said. I backed away toward the door. "No, I am leaving. I am done." My father did not chase me. He did not yell. He just stood there, leaning against his desk, watching me with a terrifying calmness. He smiled. It was a small, sad smile, like he was watching a dog run into traffic. "Okay," he said softly. "You choose your road. Jun. But remember, once you walk out that door, you are not walking back in. And if you are not with us, you are against us." "I am not against you," I sobbed. "I just want to be honest." "Honesty," he said, "is a luxury for people who can afford it. We cannot." I turned and ran. I ran out of the office, past my silent mother, out into the cool night air. I got into my car and drove. My vision blurred with tears. I didn't go to my parents' house. I drove straight to a motel on the edge of town, the cheapest one I could find. I spent the night staring at the ceiling, waiting for the police to come, waiting for my phone to ring, but it stayed silent. The next morning, I woke up with a headache that felt like a drill in my temple. I needed to check my emails. I needed to contact my university advisor, maybe ask for legal advice. I opened my laptop and tried to log into my primary email account, the one I had used for all my job applications, all my banking, all my contacts. Password incorrect. I frowned and typed it again, carefully. Password incorrect. I tried the recovery option. Send a code to your backup phone number. I clicked it, but the last 2 digits of the phone number displayed on the screen were not mine. They ended in 88. My father's number. A cold chill washed over me, starting at my scalp and moving down to my toes. I tried my bank account. Locked. Suspicious activity reported. I tried my social media. Password changed. I sat there in that dingy motel room, the realization settling over me like a suffocating blanket. This was not just a disagreement. This was not just a family fight where we would yell and then make up over Thanksgiving turkey. My father had anticipated my refusal. He had prepared for it. He had the keys to my digital life because I had trusted him. I had used their home address for my mail. I had used his number for backups when I was a teenager and never changed it. He wasn't just cutting me off. He was erasing me. He was going to control the narrative before I could even open my mouth. I was not the whistleblower anymore. In the eyes of the world, I was about to become whatever he said I was. And I knew, with a sickening certainty, that he was going to say I was the thief. I walked across the graduation stage with a smile that felt like it had been glued to my face. The dean handed me my diploma, a heavy leather-bound folder that certified I was a Bachelor of Science in Finance, graduating magna cum laude. The applause was polite. Somewhere in the back of the auditorium, my parents were sitting. I knew my mother was clapping. I knew my father was checking his watch. I held that piece of paper like it was a shield. I thought it was armor. I thought that the gold seal and the Latin honors were magic spells that would protect me from the reality of what my father had threatened. He had locked me out of my email. He had frozen my bank account. But he could not confiscate my degree. He could not repossess my intelligence. I had a plan. I would get a job. Not just any job, but a great job. I would build a war chest of my own money, get my own lawyer, and fight my way back to freedom. I was 22. I was brilliant, and I was hungry. I spent the last of my cash on a ream of high-quality resume paper, the kind that feels heavy and textured, like money itself. I printed 20 copies. I ironed my only good suit, a navy blue ensemble that made me look older, more serious. I polished my shoes until I could see the reflection of my own desperate determination in the leather. The first interview was at the First National Bank of Oak Haven. It was the biggest bank in the county. The branch manager, Mr. Henderson, was a man I had seen at church for years. He greeted me with a warm handshake. "Gene Webb," he said, ushering me into his glass-walled office. "I remember when you were selling Girl Scout cookies, and now look at you, magna cum laude. Impressive." The interview felt like a victory lap. I answered every technical question before he finished asking it. We discussed interest rate risk management and local economic trends. He nodded. Impressed? He took notes. At the end, he stood up and smiled. "This looks fantastic, Gene," he said. "We have an opening in the loan analysis department. It is entry level, but with your grades, you will move up fast. I just need to run the standard background check and call your references. I will let you know by Friday." I walked out of that bank, walking on air. I did it. It was going to be okay. Friday came. I sat by my prepaid burner phone, the one I had bought after my father cut off my main line, and waited. At 2 p.m, the phone rang. "Gene." Mr. Henderson's voice was different. It was tight, formal. "I am calling regarding your application." "Yes," I said, my heart doing a little skip. "We have decided to move in a different direction," he said. The air left my lungs. I don't understand. You said the interview went perfectly. Is there something missing in my file?" "We just found a candidate that better suits our risk profile," he said. "Good luck, Gene." The line went dead. I stared at the phone. Risk profile. That was a banking term. It meant the danger of loss. Why was I a risk? I told myself it was a fluke. Maybe the mayor's nephew needed a job. That happened in small towns. I dusted myself off. I applied to the local branch of a national insurance firm. The same thing happened. A great interview, smiles, promises, and then the silence. Then I went to the mid-sized accounting firm on the north side of town, then the logistics company, then the car dealership that needed a comptroller. It became a ritual of humiliation. I would walk in, armed with my paper shield. I would perform. I would charm. I would sell my skills with the desperation of a drowning swimmer. And every single time, I would see the light go out in their eyes. I started to doubt my own sanity. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror in my cheap apartment, a studio I was renting with money borrowed from a college friend, and dissected myself. Was it my voice? Was I too aggressive? Was I too quiet? I rewrote my CV 4 times. I removed the mention of the Webb family business from my experience section, thinking maybe nepotism was the issue. I practiced answering questions until my throat was sore. My name is Jean Webb. I am hardworking. I am honest. I am detail-oriented. I said it over and over again, trying to convince the reflection in the mirror, because the reflection was starting to look like a stranger. Dark circles were forming under my eyes. My confidence, once solid as concrete, was turning into dust. I stayed up until 3 a.m, reading articles on how to ace the interview and why you are not getting hired. I analyzed every handshake, every smile, every pause. I was driving myself crazy. I was looking for the flaw in the product, never suspecting that the market itself had been rigged. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. I had an interview at a distribution center for a regional grocery chain. It was not a glamorous job. It was a payroll clerk position, far below my qualifications, but I needed to pay rent. The HR manager was a woman named Mrs. Higgins. She was soft, maternal, with reading glasses on a chain around her neck. We clicked immediately. She saw my transcript and actually gasped. "Jean, you are overqualified for this," she said gently, "but if you are willing to work, we are desperate for someone who can actually use Excel. You are hired. I just need to get the sign-off from the general manager." She picked up the phone right there in front of me. She dialed an extension. "Hey, Bob," she said cheerfully. "I have a great candidate here, Jean Webb, Raymond Webb's daughter. Yes, she is sitting right here." I watched her face. The smile froze. Then it faded. Then her skin turned a pale, sickly gray. She pulled the phone away from her ear slightly, as if the voice on the other end was shouting, though I could hear nothing. She looked at me. Her eyes were wide with shock, and then, slowly, they filled with fear. "Oh," she whispered into the phone. "I see. I didn't know. Thank you for telling me." She hung up the phone. Her hand was shaking as she placed the receiver back in the cradle. "Mrs. Higgins?" I asked. My voice sounded very small. "Is everything okay?" She would not look at me. She shuffled my papers together, sliding them across the desk back to me. It was a gesture of dismissal so final it felt like a slap. "I am sorry, Jean," she said, staring at her desk calendar. "We cannot hire you." "Why?" I demanded. I felt the tears pricking my eyes, hot and angry. 2 minutes ago I was hired. What did he say? "Please leave," she said. "I have a right to know." I stood up, my hands gripping the edge of her desk. "I have a degree. I have a clean record. I have done nothing wrong. Why won't anyone hire me?" Mrs. Higgins looked up then. There was genuine pity in her eyes, but it was overshadowed by the instinct for self-preservation. She leaned forward and whispered, as if the room was bugged. "Jean," she said, "you should ask your father." "My father?" "Ask him," she repeated. "Ask him what he told the Chamber of Commerce meeting last month. Ask him why every business owner in this town thinks you are radioactive." She stood up and opened her office door. "Now please go. I cannot be seen talking to you." I walked out of that building, but I did not go back to my apartment. I got into my car and turned toward the wealthy side of town. I drove fast. I didn't care about the speed limit. The landscape blurred past me. The manicured lawns, the white picket fences, the facade of perfect suburban life. It all looked like a stage set now, a lie built to hide the rot underneath. I pulled into the driveway of my parents' house. My father's truck was there. Of course it was. It was 5:30. He would be in his chair, watching the news, drinking a beer, the king of his castle. I didn't knock. I used my key, the one I hadn't returned yet, and threw the front door open. The house smelled of pot roast and lemon polish. It smelled like safety. It smelled like a lie. My father was indeed in his chair. My mother was sitting on the sofa, leafing through a catalog. They both looked up as I stormed in. "Jean?" my mother said, startled. "We weren't expecting you. Is everything all right?" I ignored her. I walked straight to my father. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look angry. He looked calm. He took a sip of his beer and set it down on the coaster. "Mrs. Higgins says hello," I said. My father raised an eyebrow. "Bob Higgins' wife? Nice woman. A bit soft, but nice." "She told me to ask you," I said, my voice shaking with a rage I had never let myself feel before. "She told me to ask you why I can't get a job sweeping floors in this town, let alone an accounting position." My father sighed. He picked up the remote and muted the television. "I was wondering when you would figure it out," he said. "I thought you were smarter than this." "John, it took you 3 weeks?" "What did you do?" I screamed. "What did you say to them?" "I told the truth," he said calmly. "The truth? The truth is that I am innocent. The truth is that you are the one cooking the books." "That is your version," he said. Standing up, he was a big man, and he used his size to intimidate, occupying the space like a physical wall. "My version, which happens to be the version of a respected business owner who has lived here for 30 years, is different." He walked over to the fireplace mantel and adjusted a picture frame. "I simply gave my friends a heads up," he said, his back to me. "I told them that my daughter is brilliant, yes, but troubled. I told them that we had to let you go from your internship because of irregularities." "Irregularities?" I choked out. He turned around, a small, cruel smile playing on his lips. "Missing petty cash, invoices that were altered. I told them that as much as it breaks my heart as a father, I could not, in good conscience, let them hire a thief. I told them I was handling it internally, getting you help." My knees almost gave out. I grabbed the back of the sofa to steady myself. He had taken his own crimes, the fake invoices, the stolen money, and he had pinned them on me. He had projected his shadow onto my reputation. "You called me a thief," I whispered. "You destroyed my name." "I protected my community," he said. "And I protected you from making a mistake. You are not ready for the real world. Jean, you are clearly unstable. Look at you. You are hysterical." "I am hysterical because you murdered my future." "I put your future on hold," he corrected. "Until you are ready to do the right thing." He took a step closer, his voice dropping to that lethal, quiet tone. "Here is the reality. Jean, no one is going to hire you. Not the bank, not the grocery store, not the gas station, because in this town, my word is gold, and your word is nothing. Anyone who hires you hires trouble, and nobody wants trouble with Raymond Webb." I looked at my mother. She was sitting very still, her hands gripping the catalog so hard the pages were crinkled. "Mom," I said, "Mom, tell him this is insane. Tell him he can't do this to me." My mother looked up. Her eyes were swimming with tears. She looked at my father, who was staring at her with an expectant expression. Then she looked at me. I saw the struggle in her face. I saw the mother who had bandaged my knees when I fell off my bike. I saw the woman who had taught me to read. I waited for her to stand up. I waited for her to scream. "John," she said, her voice trembling. "Please, don't make a big scene." The words hit me harder than my father's lies. "A scene?" I repeated. "He is ruining my life, and you are worried about the noise?" "He is doing what he thinks is best," she sobbed quietly. Just come home. Just sign the papers. Jean, please, if you sign the papers, this all goes away. We can be a family again. We can have dinner. You can have your job back." "I don't want that job." "It is the only job you are going to get," my mother cried out, a flash of desperate anger in her voice. "Why do you have to be so stubborn? Why do you have to ruin everything for Grant? For us?" I stared at her. It wasn't that she didn't believe me. She knew the truth. She knew Grant was incompetent and my father was a crook. She knew I was innocent, but she didn't care. She chose her comfort over my integrity. She chose the lie because the lie came with a nice house and a husband who paid the bills. She was willing to sacrifice me to keep her world steady. "I see," I said, the rage drained out of me, replaced by a cold, hollow clarity. "I finally see." "Good," my father said. thinking he had won. Now, go get your things from that apartment. Come home. We will have a nice dinner. I will have the papers ready in the morning. He thought it was over. He thought he had broken me. He thought that by taking away my options, he had forced me into his cage. He was right about one thing. He had taken away my options. He had taken away the path of the good girl, the honest student, the hard worker. He had burned the bridge I wanted to walk on, but he forgot who had raised me in the afternoons while he was busy pouring concrete. He forgot who had taught me to read the fine print. I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see a father. I saw a target. No, I said. My father blinked. What did you say? I said no, I repeated. I am not coming home. I am not signing your papers, and I am not going to let you win. You have no money, he sneered. You have no job. You have no friends. How exactly are you going to fight me? I don't know yet, I said. But I will figure it out, and when I do, you are going to wish you had just let me leave. I turned around and walked out. Jean, my mother called after me. Jean, come back. Let her go, I heard my father say as I reached the door. She will be back in a week when she gets hungry. She has nowhere else to go. I slammed the door behind me. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet suburban street. I got into my car and drove away. I didn't go back to the apartment. I knew I couldn't afford it anymore. I drove to the outskirts of town, to the highway that led to the city, to the places where my father's name meant nothing. But his name didn't mean nothing. His reach was long, and his lies traveled faster than I could drive. I didn't know it yet, but I wasn't escaping. I was just moving to a different kind of prison. I pulled into a cheap motel called the Starlight Inn. The neon sign was buzzing and flickering. The L burned out so it read, The Starlight Inn. I went to the front desk. The manager was a man with a grease-stained shirt and eyes that had seen too much. Room for the night? He asked. For the week, I said. And are you hiring? I can clean. I can work nights. He looked at my suit. He looked at my desperate eyes. He didn't ask for a resume. He didn't ask for references. $7 an hour, he said. Cash. Start tonight. Deal, I said. And just like that, Jean Webb, magna cum laude, became Jean the maid. My father had wanted to teach me a lesson about power. He thought poverty would humble me. He thought scrubbing toilets would break my spirit. He was wrong. It didn't break me. It clarified me. It gave me 22 months to think, 22 months to hate, and 22 months to wait for the one mistake he would inevitably make. The Starlight Inn was not a place where people stayed because they wanted to be there. It was a place where people stayed because they had run out of road. It sat on the edge of the highway. A U-shaped block of concrete painted a color that might have been yellow 30 years ago, but was now the color of a bruised banana. The neon sign buzzed with an angry electric hum that you could hear even with the windows closed. My life had shrunk to the dimensions of a mop bucket. I worked the graveyard shift, which meant my day started when the sun went down and the shadows grew long. My title was technically night auditor, which sounded professional, but the reality was that I was the clerk, the janitor, the security guard, and the maid. I earned $7.25 an hour. I want you to understand what that number means. $7.25 an hour means you have to work nearly 3 hours just to buy a tank of gas. It means that a sandwich from the diner next door cost 2 hours of my life. It means that saving money was a mathematical impossibility. I was not living. I was treading water in a sea of chlorine and industrial cleaner. I had become invisible. During the day, I slept in a small room behind the office that the manager, Cal, let me use for $50 a week. It was a storage closet with a cot, but it had a lock, and that was all that mattered when I woke up. I put on the polyester uniform that was 2 sizes too big. It was a hideous maroon vest over a white shirt that had permanent yellow stains under the arms from the previous employees. I stopped telling people I had a degree in finance. I stopped mentioning that I could build a pivot table in Excel or analyze a balance sheet. Here, those things were not assets. They were liabilities. If you are too smart, people think you are up to something. So I learned to keep my head down. I learned to speak less. I learned to look at the floor. I was scrubbing the linoleum in the lobby one Tuesday evening when the bell above the door chimed. It was barely 6 o'clock, usually a quiet time before the truckers and the weary travelers started rolling in. I did not look up immediately. I just kept moving the mop in slow. Gray circles, smelling the sharp sting of bleach. "Table for 4, a voice boomed. "And make sure the glasses are clean. We don't want any diseases." I froze. The mop handle felt suddenly slick in my hands. I knew that voice. It was the voice that had commanded construction crews. It was the voice that had ordered my life. I looked up. Standing in the doorway of the motel diner, which was connected to the lobby by a glass partition, was my family, my father. Raymond Webb was wearing his Sunday suit, the navy blue one with the gold cufflinks. My mother was in a floral dress, her hair perfectly coiffed, clutching her purse like a shield. Grant was there, looking bored and scrolling on his phone, and with them was a man I did not recognize, a heavy-set man in a gray suit who looked like a banker or an investor. They were not here to stay. They were here to eat. The Starlight Diner was known for having the best fried catfish in the county, a greasy indulgence that attracted people from all walks of life. But my father never ate here. He called places like this roach motels. Unless he had an audience, unless he wanted to show someone exactly how far I had fallen. My father saw me. He did not look away. He did not look embarrassed. A slow, wide smile spread across his face, the kind of smile a predator gives when the prey is trapped in the corner. "Well, look at this," he said loudly. He didn't walk to a table. He walked straight toward me, his expensive leather shoes clicking on the linoleum I had just cleaned. The stranger in the gray suit followed him, looking confused. "I told you my daughter was working in the hospitality industry," my father said to the stranger, gesturing at me with a sweep of his hand. "Jean, say hello to Mr. Sterling. He is thinking of financing our new expansion." I stood there, gripping the mop. I was wearing the maroon vest. My hair was tied back in a messy bun. I had rubber gloves on my hands. I felt stripped naked. "Hello?" I whispered. "Speak up, Jean," my father said. His voice jovial, but his eyes hard as flint. "Service with a smile, right? That is what they pay you for." He turned to Mr. Sterling. Jean decided the corporate world was too stressful. She wanted something simpler, more hands-on. Isn't that right, Jean? He was rewriting history in real time. He was turning my exile into a quirky lifestyle choice, a failure of my character rather than a result of his sabotage. Grant snickered. He walked over and kicked the wet floor sign I had set up. It clattered across the tiles. "Careful, Dad," Grant said, his voice dripping with mock concern. "Don't get too close. She smells like toilet water." "Grant, be nice," my mother murmured. But she didn't look at me. She was looking at the menu on the wall, studying the price of eggs as if it contained the secrets of the universe. She was doing what she always did, pretending the ugliness wasn't happening. "It is good work," my father said, stepping closer to me until I could smell his cologne. It was a scent that used to mean safety to me. Now it smelled like poison. "Honest work. Much better suited for you. Jean, no complex numbers to confuse you here. Just dirt. You can handle dirt, can't you?" He reached out and patted my shoulder. It was a heavy, possessive tap. "I am proud of you," he said, loud enough for the diner cook to hear. "You finally found the right job. You finally found your level." Something inside me broke. It wasn't a loud break. It wasn't a scream. It was the sound of a heavy iron door slamming shut and locking in the deepest part of my heart. For 22 months, a small, foolish part of me had hoped. I had hoped that if I struggled enough, if I suffered enough, they would feel sorry for me. I had hoped that my mother would call. I had hoped my father would realize he had gone too far. But looking at his face now, seeing the pure, unadulterated joy he took in my humiliation, I realized the truth. He didn't want me to learn a lesson. He wanted me to be destroyed. He needed me to be nothing so that he could feel like everything. And my mother? She was not a victim. She was an accomplice. Her silence was the weapon she handed him every day. I stopped shaking. My spine straightened. I looked my father in the eye. "Table for 4?" I asked. My voice was flat, dead. "The diner entrance is to your left. Please do not walk on the wet floor." My father blinked. He had expected tears. He had expected me to beg or to run away. He didn't expect the void. "Right," he said, clearing his throat. He turned to Mr. Sterling. "Shall we? The catfish is legendary." They walked past me. Grant bumped my shoulder as he passed, whispering, "Loser." I watched them sit down in a booth by the window. I watched my mother unfold her napkin. I watched my father laugh at something the banker said. They looked like a perfect family. I turned back to my bucket. I dipped the mop in the gray water. I squeezed it out. I kept mopping. I did not cry. I did not feel sad. I felt cold. I felt the kind of cold that preserves things. The kind of cold that keeps anger fresh for 100 years. "Jean." I looked up. Cal, the manager, was standing behind the front desk. He was a man of few words, a Vietnam vet who spent most of his time reading paperback westerns and smoking unfiltered cigarettes outside the back door. He had seen everything. He had heard everything. He looked at the family in the booth. Then he looked at me. "You okay?" he asked. "I am fine, Cal," I said. "Just cleaning." "You don't belong here, kid," he said. He didn't say it meanly. He said it like a statement of fact, like looking at the sky and saying it was blue. "I don't know what you did, or what they think you did, but you don't belong here." "I have nowhere else to go," I said. He lit a cigarette, ignoring the no smoking sign he had put up himself. He took a long drag and blew the smoke toward the ceiling fan. "Just survive the week," he said. "That is the trick. You don't have to live. You just have to not die. You survive this week. Then you survive the next one. Eventually, the wheel turns." He was right. I had to survive. But I knew I couldn't stay in Oak Haven. The air here was toxic. As long as I was within the blast radius of Raymond Webb, I was dead. I started applying for jobs in the city, 3 hours away. I used the motel computer in the middle of the night when things were quiet. I searched for anything: junior analyst, payroll assistant, bank teller. But the digital world was just as close to me as the physical one. Every application asked for the same thing: employment history. I had a gaping hole of nearly 2 years, 2 years where I was supposedly unemployed, and then came the references. "Please list a supervisor from your previous position." I stared at the blinking cursor. Who could I list? My father? Who would tell them I was a thief? Mrs. Higgins? Who was terrified of him? Cal? The motel manager? I tried to lie. I tried to stretch the dates of my college internships, but the automated systems were smart. They flagged the gaps. I got a few phone interviews, mostly because my university grades were so high they triggered the algorithms. I remember one call vividly. It was with a recruiter from a mid-sized firm in the state capital. She sounded enthusiastic at first. "Your academic record is stellar, Jean," she said. "But I am looking at this timeline. You graduated almost 2 years ago. What have you been doing since then?" I sat on the edge of my cot in the storage room, the smell of stale beer drifting in from the hallway. I had decided to try the truth. Not the whole truth, but a version of it. "I had a family situation," I said. "My family owns a business, and there was a conflict of ethics. I had to leave. It was difficult, and it disrupted my career path." There was a silence on the other end. A long, uncomfortable silence. "A conflict of ethics?" the recruiter repeated. Her tone had cooled by 20 degrees. "With your own family?" "Yes," I said. "I refused to sign off on some financial irregularities. It led to a falling out." I thought she would respect that. I thought she would hear integrity. "I see," she said. "Jun, I will be honest with you. That sounds complicated. It is complicated, I admitted. But I am a hard worker. I just need a chance to prove it. The problem is, she said, her voice sounding like she was reading from a script, our clients value stability, drama, even if it is ethical drama, is a red flag. If you cannot get along with your own family business, how can we be sure you will fit into our corporate culture? So honesty is a red flag? I asked, my voice trembling. Liability is a red flag, she said. We will keep your resume on file. I hung up. I tried again. The next time. I was vague. I took time off to travel. For 2 years? The interviewer asked. With no income? That doesn't seem financially prudent for an accountant. I tried again. I have been working freelance. Can we see your client list? I hit a wall every single time. My father had not just burned the bridge. He had salted the earth on the other side. He had created a narrative where I was either a thief, a liar, or a troublemaker, and the corporate world, in its infinite cowardice, preferred a safe mediocrity to a risky brilliance. I was trapped. I went back to scrubbing floors. I went back to checking in guests who paid in cash and didn't want to show ID. I went back to being invisible. But something had changed since that dinner. I wasn't waiting for rescue anymore. I was waiting for ammunition. I started paying attention to the details in the motel. I started reading the discarded newspapers guests left behind. I started listening to the news on the radio while I cleaned. And then, one night, while I was cleaning out the lost and found box to make room for more junk, I found it. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a bag of money. It was an old cracked smartphone that someone had left in room 104 weeks ago. No one had claimed it. I had tossed it in the box and forgotten it. But that night, my own phone charger was broken. I needed to check the time. I remembered the lost phone. I dug it out. I plugged it in with a spare cable from the office. The screen lit up. It was an old model, sluggish and cracked. I didn't intend to snoop. I just wanted to see if it worked. But as the home screen loaded, I saw a notification pop up. It wasn't a text message. It wasn't an email. It was a voicemail icon. And next to it, a date. The date was from 3 years ago. I frowned. That was impossible. Unless this wasn't a guest's phone. I turned it over. I peeled off the cheap plastic case. And there, scratched into the back of the metal casing with a key or a knife, were initials I knew better than my own name. E.H. Evelyn Hart, my grandmother. I almost dropped the phone. My grandmother had died 4 years ago. This phone must have been in the box of old electronics my mother had donated to the motel's charity drive, a tax write-off she did every year to look generous. They dumped boxes of junk on us, and we were supposed to sort it. I must have missed it. It had been sitting in the bottom of a cardboard box in the storage room for months before I moved it to the lost and found. I stared at the voicemail icon. My heart started to hammer against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that drowned out the hum of the neon sign. I pressed the button. You have... New message, the robotic voice said. Received, August 12th, 2021. That was 2 weeks before she died. I held the phone to my ear. My hand was shaking so hard the plastic rattled against my earring. Jean? The voice was raspy, weak, breathless. But it was her. It was the only person who had ever loved me without condition. Jean, honey, I don't know if you will ever get this. Your mother. She watches me like a hawk. She took my good phone. She thinks I am senile. A cough. A long, rattling intake of breath. But I hid this one. Listen to me. The lawyer. Mr. Vance. He knows. But he can't call the house. Raymond blocked him. You have to find the letter. It is not in the safe. I didn't trust the safe. She paused. I could hear the sound of a heart monitor beeping in the background. I left it where the numbers start. Remember? Where we learn to count. Find it, Jean. And when you do, you go to the city. You go to Sterling and Vance. You tell them Evelyn sent you. The recording clicked off. I sat there in the silence of the storage room. The tears I hadn't cried in the diner finally came, hot and fast. streaming down my face. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of awakening. Sterling and Vance, Mr. Sterling, the man in the gray suit, the man my father had brought to the diner to humiliate me, the man my father was trying to get money from. My father didn't know. He had no idea. He was trying to court the very firm that my grandmother had seemingly made a pact with. I looked at the phone. I looked at the date, where the numbers start. I knew exactly what she meant. I stood up. I wiped my face. I took off the maroon vest and threw it on the cot. I wasn't Jean the maid anymore. I was Jean Webb, the granddaughter of Evelyn Hart, and I had a scavenger hunt to finish. I sat on the edge of the cot in the storage room, the air thick with the smell of dust and floor wax. The phone in my hand felt heavy, like a loaded gun. I played the message again and again. The timestamp was from 3 years ago, just weeks before Grandma Evelyn passed away. The voice was not hers this time. It was a woman, professional and brisk, identifying herself as a paralegal from the offices of Blackwood and Associates. Ms. Webb, we are trying to reach you regarding the finalization of the Evelyn Hart estate planning. Please return our call at your earliest convenience. I stared at the device. I felt a cold numbness spreading through my chest, displacing the anger. I remembered the funeral vividly. It was a humid day in September. My father had stood at the pulpit, looking somber and dignified in his black suit. He spoke about Evelyn's quiet strength and her simple life. Afterward, at the reception in our living room, I had asked him about her affairs. I knew she owned her house. I knew she had investments. My father had put a hand on my shoulder, sighing with the weight of a man carrying the world. There is nothing left. Jean, he had said, the nursing home bills were astronomical. The medical costs ate everything. I had to pay for the funeral out of my own pocket. She died with zero balance. I had believed him. Why wouldn't I? I was grieving. I didn't ask to see the receipts. I didn't ask to see the will. I trusted my father to handle the messy business of death while I handled the sorrow. But the voicemail on this cracked screen told a different story. Paralegals do not call beneficiaries to discuss an estate that does not exist. I looked at the clock. It was 9 a.m. The law office would be open. I did not use the motel phone. I walked 3 blocks to a convenience store and bought a prepaid calling card with cash. I stood at the payphone outside, shivering in the morning chill despite the summer heat, and dialed the number from the voicemail. Blackwood and Associates, a receptionist answered. I am calling regarding the estate of Evelyn Hart, I said. My voice was steady, but my pulse was hammering in my throat. My name is Jean Webb. I am her granddaughter. There was a pause, the sound of typing. Then, the tone of the receptionist changed. It went from polite to guarded. 1 moment, please. I waited for 5 minutes. I watched the cars rush by on the highway. People going to jobs, going home, living lives that didn't involve uncovering family conspiracies. Finally, a man came on the line. Ms. Webb, he said. I am Arthur Blackwood. I am surprised to hear from you. Why? I asked. Because the file has been closed for 3 years, he said. We received your instructions clearly. My instructions? Yes, he said. We reached out to you multiple times to discuss the bequest Mrs. Hart left for you. We were told, quite explicitly, that you wanted nothing to do with it, that you refused the inheritance in its entirety. The ground seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I gripped the receiver so hard my knuckles turned white. I never spoke to you, I whispered. I never refused anything. Ms. Webb, we have the documentation, Blackwood said, his voice impatient. Your family representative handled the communication. He stated that you were emotionally unable to deal with the process and that you wished to waive all claims to the assets. Who? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Who was the representative? Mr. Raymond Webb, Blackwood said. Your father? I closed my eyes. Of course. It wasn't enough to destroy my future. He had to rob my past, too. He had intercepted the calls. He had intercepted the mail. He had stood over my grandmother's grave and lied to my face, telling me she died penniless, while he waved away whatever she had tried to leave me. "Mr. Blackwood," I said, forcing my voice to stop shaking. "I did not authorize that refusal. My father lied to you. I want to reopen the file." "It is not that simple," the lawyer sighed. "The probate period is over. The assets that were under our local jurisdiction were absorbed, liquidated to cover administrative costs and debts that your father presented to us." "So it is gone?" I asked. "He took it all? The house and the local accounts?" "Yes," Blackwood said. "However," he trailed off. I held my breath. "Mrs. Hart was a very particular woman." Blackwood continued slowly. "She divided her estate into 2 tiers. The local assets were Tier 1, but there was a Tier 2, a separate portfolio. We did not hold the keys to that. We only held the instructions on how to access it." "Where is it?" I asked. "It is held in a blind trust," he said. "Managed by a firm in the city, Sterling and Vance." The name hit me like a physical blow. The same firm my father was trying to woo, the same firm whose CEO was coming to town. "The instruction regarding that trust was unique," Blackwood said, his voice dropping as if he was sharing a secret. "It was sealed under a conditional release clause. It could not be accessed by a representative. It could not be accessed by a proxy. It requires the beneficiary to present themselves in person, with specific identification, at the firm's headquarters." "Did my father know about this?" "He knew it existed," Blackwood said dryly. "He tried very hard to gain access to it. He claimed he had your power of attorney, but the firm in the city refused him. They adhere to a higher standard of compliance than we do here in the country. They told him the beneficiary must appear. Since you refused the inheritance, the trust has simply sat there, dormant." I understood then. My father hadn't stolen the second part of the money because he couldn't. He had been blocked by the red tape he hated so much, so he had done the next best thing. He had ensured I would never find out about it. If I never knew it existed, I could never claim it. And if I never claimed it, maybe, eventually, after enough years passed, he could figure out a way to crack it open. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood," I said. "Ms. Webb," he added before I could hang up, "if you are going to the city, take your birth certificate, and take caution. Your father was very insistent." I hung up the phone. I walked back to the motel in a daze. I had a target now. Sterling and Vance. I had a name. I had a destination. But I still had a problem. I was stuck in Oakhaven with $40 in my pocket and a shift starting in 6 hours. I needed a way to get to the city. I needed a suit. I needed a bus ticket. As I walked into the motel office, the landline on the front desk was ringing. Cal was outside smoking. I picked up the phone. "Starlight Inn," I said automatically. "Jean." My blood ran cold. It was my father. He didn't ask who it was. He knew my schedule. He knew I answered the phone at this time. "Dad," I said. "I am glad I caught you," he said. His voice was different than it had been at the diner. The arrogance was dialed back. There was a strain in it, a tightness that sounded like panic wrapped in velvet. "How are you? How is the hospitality business?" "I am working." "Dad," I said. "What do you want?" "I want to offer you a truce," he said. I said nothing. I let the silence stretch, forcing him to fill it. "Look, Jean," he said, and I could hear the creak of his leather chair on the other end. "I think we both made some mistakes. I was too harsh. You were too emotional, but we are family, and families fix things." "You called me a thief," I said. "You told the whole town I was a criminal." "I was angry," he said quickly, "and I can fix that. I can make a few calls. I can tell everyone it was a misunderstanding, a clerical error. I can clear your name, Jean, by Monday morning. You could be respectable again." "And what do I have to do?" I asked. "Just come home," he said. "We have the Riverdale audit starting next week. The bank is sending a team. They are going to want to see the books. Mrs. Gable is gone. I need someone who knows the system. I need you to sign off on the historicals." There it was. The historicals. The fraud. He wasn't calling because he missed me. He wasn't calling because he felt guilty. He was calling because the walls were closing in. The bank audit was coming. And he knew his books were a crime scene. He needed a patsy. He needed someone with a CPA license to put their neck on the block and say, "This is all correct." If I signed those papers, I would be legally responsible for years of embezzlement. I would be his human shield. "You want me to go to prison for you," I said. "I want you to save the company," he hissed. "The company that paid for your clothes. The company that paid for your college. You owe us this. Jean, if the bank finds problems, they pull the funding. If they pull the funding, we lose the house. We lose everything. Do you want to be responsible for destroying your mother's life?" It was a masterclass in manipulation. He was holding my mother hostage. He was weaponizing my guilt. "I can't do it, Dad," I said. "Jean, listen to me." His voice dropped, becoming dark and threatening. "You think you are noble. You are just stupid. You are scrubbing toilets for $7 an hour. That is your life now. Do you think it is going to get better? Do you think a prince is going to walk into that dump and rescue you? I am your only way out. You sign the paper, you get your life back, you refuse, and you die in that motel." "I would rather die in the motel than live in your jail," I said. "Fine," he spat. "Then rot. But don't think you can leave. I am watching you. Jean, if you try to run, I will make sure the police are waiting for you at the county line. I will tell them you stole cash from the register before you left." He hung up. I stood there, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. He was terrified. I could smell it. He was desperate enough to threaten me, desperate enough to beg. The audit was the clock ticking down on his fraud. He thought he had me trapped. He thought his threat would keep me paralyzed in Oakhaven. But he didn't know about Tier 2. He didn't know I had spoken to Blackwood. He didn't know that my grandmother had left me a key to a door he couldn't lock. I looked at the schedule on the wall. I had 1 day off coming up. Tomorrow. I didn't have a car. I had sold it 2 months ago to pay a medical bill. I didn't have enough money for a train ticket, but I had something else. I went to the back room and opened my bag. I pulled out the only thing of value I had left, a small silver locket that my grandmother had given me on my 16th birthday. It was the only thing I hadn't sold because it wasn't worth much money. But inside, behind the picture of us, was a folded $100 bill she had tucked in there for a rainy day. I had forgotten about it until now. I pried the locket open with my fingernail. The bill was there, crisp and folded small. $100. Enough for a bus ticket to the city, enough for a cheap meal. I wasn't going to run away. I was going to run toward the one place my father couldn't follow. I walked out to the parking lot where Cal was crushing his cigarette butt under his boot. "Cal," I said, "I need to ask for a favor. A big one." He looked at me, his eyes narrowing against the sun. "You look different, kid." "I am leaving," I said. "Tonight, after my shift. But I need you to cover for me. If anyone asks, if my father asks, tell them I am sick. Tell them I am in my room sleeping. Buy me 24 hours. Cal looked at me for a long time. He looked at the determination in my jaw, the fire that had finally lit up in my eyes. He didn't ask where I was going. He didn't ask why. "You leaving for good?" he asked. "I am going to get what is mine," I said. He nodded slowly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a wad of cash. It was mostly 1s and 5s, tips from the diner. "Take it," he said, holding it out. "Cal, I can't." "Take it," he grunted. "Call it severance. Get out of here, Jean, and don't look back." I took the money. My hands were shaking. "Thank you," I whispered. "Go," he said. I went back to my room. I packed my single bag. I ironed my suit with a hair straightener. My father was right about one thing. The audit was coming, but he was wrong about who was going to conduct it. It wasn't going to be the bank. It was going to be me. I sat at the ancient desktop computer in the motel lobby. the screen flickering with a nervous twitch that matched my own heartbeat. It was 3 in the morning. My shift was technically over, but adrenaline is a powerful stimulant. I had the name from the voicemail burned into my retina. Sterling and Vance. I knew who they were. Everyone in the finance world knew who they were. They were the titans, the market makers, the firm that did not just predict the future but seemed to engineer it. Applying there was not aiming high, it was aiming for the moon with a slingshot, but I had the voicemail, and I had a theory. If my grandmother had hidden something there, maybe, just maybe, the name Webb would trigger something other than a rejection letter in their system. I pulled up their careers page. There was an opening for a junior financial analyst. It was a position I could have done in my sleep 3 years ago. Now, with a resume that looked like Swiss cheese and a reputation that smelled like arson, it was laughable. I attached my CV. I didn't bother with a cover letter begging for a chance. I simply wrote one line in the body of the email. I am the granddaughter of Evelyn Hart, and I am coming to claim my narrative. I hit send. I expected silence. I expected the void. I expected that 2 weeks from now, a bot would send me a polite notification that they had received my application and thrown it into a digital incinerator. I went back to the storage room to finish packing my single bag. 17 minutes later, the computer chimed. I froze. I walked back to the desk. There was a new email in the inbox. It was not from a no-reply address. It was from executive assistant at sterlingvance.com. I opened it, my hand shaking so hard I could barely control the mouse. Dear Ms. Webb, Mr. Victor Lang has reviewed your submission. He requests your presence for an interview tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock sharp. Please bring the identification mentioned in your grandmother's instructions. Sincerely, Sarah Jenkins, Executive Office. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Victor Lang, the CEO, the man whose face was on the cover of Forbes last month. He wanted to interview a junior analyst applicant? That was impossible. It was a glitch in the matrix. Or it was a trap. My mind immediately went to the darkest corner. My father? Had he set this up? Was this some elaborate game where I would show up, hope rising in my chest, only to find him sitting in the CEO's chair, laughing at me? See, Jean, I own everything, even your escape. But the domain name was real. The address was the headquarters in the financial district. And the mention of grandmother's instructions was something my father could not have known about. Not the specific way the lawyer had phrased it. I printed the email. It felt like a golden ticket. I walked out to the parking lot where Cal was hosing down the sidewalk. The sun was just starting to crack the horizon, painting the ugly concrete of the motel in a soft, forgiving pink. I got an interview, I said. Cal stopped spraying. He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. Where? The city, I said. A big firm. The kind of place that has marble floors and security guards who wear earpieces. When? Tomorrow morning. Cal nodded. He walked over to the faucet and turned off the water. The silence that followed was heavy. He knew what this meant. If I left, I wasn't coming back to work the night shift. I was leaving him short-handed. I was leaving the only sanctuary I had found. You need a bus ticket, he said. It wasn't a question. I have the tip money you gave me, I said. And I found $100 my grandmother hid in a locket. I can make it. You need to eat, he said gruffly. And you need to sleep somewhere that doesn't have bedbugs before you go into a place with marble floors. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a leather wallet that looked as worn as his face. He took out 2 20s and shoved them into my hand. Cal, no. I started to protest. You already gave me. Take it, he snapped. Consider it an investment. When you are rich and famous, you can come back and buy this dump, turn it into a parking lot, do the world a favor. I took the money. I looked at this man, this stranger who had treated me with more dignity in 22 months than my own family had in a lifetime. Go, he said, turning back to the hose. Go get your life back, kid. I walked to the bus station. The ride was 3 hours of nausea and nerves. I sat next to a woman who was knitting a scarf, the clicking of her needles counting down the seconds of my old life. I watched the landscape change from the flat, dusty plains of Oakhaven to the sprawling, industrial outskirts of the metropolis. The city was a beast. It was loud, chaotic, and indifferent. Exactly what I needed. I found a motel 6 blocks from the financial district. It was not the Starlight Inn, but it wasn't the Ritz either. The carpet was sticky, and the air conditioner rattled like a dying engine. I didn't care. I paid for the room, locked the door, and collapsed on the bed. But I couldn't sleep. The anxiety was a live wire in my chest. I got up and took my suit out of the bag. It was wrinkled from the journey. I went into the bathroom and turned the shower on the hottest setting, hanging the suit on the back of the door, hoping the steam would release the creases of poverty. I stood in front of the mirror. The glass was fogged up. I wiped a circle clear with my hand and looked at myself. I looked tired. My eyes were shadowed. My skin was pale. I didn't look like a financial prodigy. I looked like a survivor of a shipwreck. "So, Ms. Webb," I whispered to my reflection, practicing the interrogation I knew was coming. "I see a significant gap in your employment history. Can you explain that?" I watched my own face. I tried to smile, the fake corporate smile I had perfected in college. I took some time off to pursue personal projects. No, that was a lie. And it sounded like a lie. I was caring for a sick relative. Also a lie. I was blacklisted by a vindictive father who runs a fraudulent construction empire. Too much truth. Too messy. I took a deep breath. I leaned closer to the mirror. "I worked," I said firmly. "I worked to survive. I scrubbed floors. I checked in guests. I managed inventory. I learned that dignity isn't in the job title. It is in the work itself. I am ready to start again." It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and after 2 years of living in a hallucination created by my father, reality was the only weapon I had left. I barely slept. I spent the night staring at the ceiling, listening to the sirens outside, clutching the locket in my hand. Morning came with a gray, overcast sky. I dressed in the damp, steamed suit. I pulled my hair back into a tight bun. I put on the only lipstick I owned, a shade of red that felt like war paint. I checked out of the motel at 8:30. I walked toward the Sterling and Vance Tower. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I knew who it was. I didn't have to look, but I looked anyway. Home, my father. I stopped on the sidewalk. People were rushing past me, a river of commuters flowing toward the glass skyscrapers. I was a stone in the current. I answered. "Hello, Dad?" "You are in the city," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the terrifying omniscience he loved to display. "How do you know?" I asked. "I called the motel," he said. "Cal told me you were sick, but Cal is a bad liar. And then I checked the activity on your old debit card. You checked the balance at an ATM on 5th Street an hour ago. Did you think I stopped monitoring it just because it was empty?" A chill went down my spine. He was watching the zeros in my account. "I am not coming back, Dad," I said. "Gene," he said, his voice dropping to that dangerous, reasonable tone. "Don't do this. You are out of your depth. You are going to walk into some office, beg for a job, and they are going to laugh at you. And then you are going to be stranded. No money, no friends, just a girl in a cheap suit." "I have an interview," I said. I couldn't help myself. I wanted him to know. There was a pause on the other end, a sharp intake of breath. "With who?" he demanded. "Who would interview you?" "Sterling and Vance," I said. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the silence of a man who realizes the prey has jumped the fence. "You are lying," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I am standing in front of the building." I lied. I was still 3 blocks away. "I have an appointment." "Listen to me," he hissed. "I know people there. I submitted a bid for their new headquarters project. If you go in there and start spreading your lies, you won't just ruin me, you will ruin yourself. I will call them right now. I will tell them everything. I will tell them you are mentally unstable. I will tell them you stole from the motel. Go ahead, I said. Make the call. Let's see who they believe. Gene, he shouted. I hung up. I turned the phone off. I started walking again. Faster this time. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. He was going to call. I knew he was. He was going to poison the well before I could even take a sip. My phone buzzed again. I hadn't turned it all the way off yet. Just the screen. It was a text. Grant, Dad's on the phone with their main line. You're in serious trouble. Come home before he shuts you out completely. I stopped. I stared at the message. History was repeating itself. This was the moment where I usually folded. This was the moment where shame would wash over me, where the fear of his influence would freeze me in place. I already made the call. He had said 22 months ago, and he was doing it again. I looked up at the Sterling and Vance Tower. It soared into the sky, a monolith of steel and glass reflecting the gray clouds. It looked impenetrable. It looked like a fortress already drawing its gates against me. But then I touched the locket around my neck. I felt the cool, firm edge of the metal against my skin. If you're ever backed against a wall, Grandma had said, find the door I left. My father was calling the switchboard. He was calling HR. He was calling the project managers he knew. But he wasn't calling the CEO. He couldn't. He didn't have that number. I did. I wasn't walking in as Jean Webb, the disgraced daughter of a local contractor. I was walking in as the beneficiary of a trust that had been waiting for me in the dark. I shoved the phone deep into my pocket. I squared my shoulders. I stepped into the revolving door. The noise of the city, the sirens, the shouting, the phantom voice of my father was cut off instantly. Silence, cool air, the smell of money. I walked toward the reception desk. I was terrified. I was shaking. But for the first time in 2 years, I wasn't running away. I was running straight into the fire. The office of Victor Lang was not what I expected. I had anticipated a throne room of intimidation, glass walls, sleek chrome furniture, and a desk the size of an aircraft carrier designed to make visitors feel small. Instead, the room smelled of old leather and pipe tobacco. The walls were lined with bookshelves packed with actual books, not decorative spines. In the corner, a grandfather clock ticked with a slow, rhythmic, heavy beat that seemed to slow down time itself. Victor Lang stood by the window, looking out at the gray city skyline. He was a man in his late 50s, with salt and pepper hair and a posture that suggested he didn't need to shout to be heard. He was wearing a charcoal suit that fit him with the kind of precision money cannot buy off the rack. When I entered, escorted by the receptionist, he didn't turn around immediately. He let the door click shut behind me. We were alone. Mr. Lang? I said. My voice was steady, but my hands were clenching the fabric of my cheap skirt so hard my fingers ached. He turned. His eyes were dark and discerning. He didn't look at my scuffed shoes or my frizzy hair. He looked straight into my face, searching for something. You have her chin, he said softly. I blinked. Excuse me? Evelyn, he said, walking toward his desk but not sitting down. He gestured to the leather chair opposite him. Please, sit down. Ms. Webb. I sat. I felt like an imposter in a high-stakes poker game, holding a hand of cards I hadn't looked at yet. I received your email, he said, and the paralegal from Blackwood called me 10 minutes ago to confirm you had finally made contact. We have been waiting a long time for you, Jean. I didn't know, I said. My father, he intercepted everything. I only found out because of a voicemail on an old phone. I assumed as much, Victor said. Evelyn predicted that might happen. She was a woman who accounted for every variable. That is why we got along so well. He walked over to a wall safe hidden behind a framed map of the city's transit system from the 1920s. He spun the dial. Left, right, left. The heavy steel door swung open with a silent glide. He reached in and pulled out a single object. It was a thick manila envelope. The paper was yellowed with age, brittle at the corners. It was sealed not with tape, but with red wax. stamped with a signet ring I recognized immediately. It was the ring my grandmother always wore on her pinky finger. He placed the envelope on the desk between us, on the front, in the spidery, unmistakable handwriting of Evelyn Hart, were the words, "To be opened only upon my death, and only when Jean Webb walks through the door asking for a job." I stared at the writing. My breath caught in my throat. I reached out and touched the ink. It was real. She had held this. She had written this years ago, thinking of a future where I might be lost. "She gave this to me 15 years ago," Victor said quietly. "Back when this firm was just 2 rooms and a lot of ambition, everyone told her not to invest with us. They said we were too aggressive, too risky. Your father told her she was throwing her money into a fire pit." He smiled faintly. Evelyn sat in that exact chair, smoked a cigarette, which was allowed back then, and wrote a check that kept the lights on for another 6 months. She asked for one thing in return. She said, "I don't want a seat on the board. I don't want dividends paid out to me. I want you to hold it, and I want you to protect my granddaughter." "Go ahead." He nodded at the envelope. "It is yours." My hands were shaking as I broke the wax seal. The red flakes fell onto the polished mahogany desk like drops of dried blood. Inside, there were 3 documents. The first was a letter on plain stationery. The second was a thick stack of legal trust documents. The third was a single sheet of heavy bond paper with a gold border. "Read the letter first," Victor advised. I unfolded the stationery. "My dearest Jean, if you are reading this, it means the worst has happened. It means Raymond and Elaine have finally done what I always feared they would do. They have tried to clip your wings to keep you in their cage. I have watched you grow up in that house. I have seen how you starve for their approval. I have seen how you shrink yourself to fit into the small space they allow you. It breaks my heart, but I know I cannot save you from it. You have to save yourself. You have to see them for what they are. Your father is a man who builds his self-worth on the control of others. Your mother is a woman who bought peace at the price of her soul. They do not hate you, Jean, but they do not know how to love a free thing. To them, love is a leash, and because you are the smartest one in that house, you are the biggest threat to their fragile little kingdom. I knew a day would come when you would try to fly, and they would try to break your legs to keep you grounded. I prepared for that. Do not cry for me, and do not cry for them. Dry your eyes. You are a Webb by name, but you are a Hart by blood, and hearts do not beg. We own, love, Grandma. I put the letter down. A tear splashed onto the mahogany desk. I wiped it away quickly. She was right. Hearts do not beg. She knew, I whispered. She knew everything. She was a remarkable judge of character, Victor said. He pointed to the document with the gold border. "Now, look at that." I picked it up. It was a stock certificate, but it wasn't for a few shares. It was a certificate of ownership for a Class A holding in Sterling and Vance Global Partners. I looked at the number. 6%. "I don't understand," I said, looking up at Victor. 6%? Of the whole firm? Your grandmother was our first angel investor, Victor explained. She bought in when the valuation was effectively zero. Over the last 2 decades, we have grown into a multi-billion-dollar entity. We tried to buy her out many times. She refused. She moved her shares into a blind trust, the Evelyn Hart Revocable Trust, with a singular beneficiary. He leaned forward, his elbows on the desk. You own 6% of this company. Jean, that makes you the 4th largest individual shareholder. You own more of this building than I do. The room spun. I thought about the motel room. I thought about the $7 an hour. I thought about the mop bucket. I was sitting on a fortune, a literal fortune, and I had been scrubbing toilets because my father had hidden the key. "Does he know?" I asked. "Does my father know how much it is?" "He knows there is a trust," Victor said. "He has been trying to crack it for 3 years. He has sent lawyers. He has sent threats. He claimed you were mentally incompetent and that he should be the trustee. But he doesn't know the percentage. And he doesn't know the release conditions. Victor sat back and clasped his hands. A strange, cold look crossed his face, a look of professional predator satisfaction. "Which brings me to this morning," he said. He picked up a piece of paper from his side of the desk. It was a message slip. At 8:45 this morning, I received a phone call from a Mr. Raymond Webb. He was quite frantic. He managed to get through to my assistant by claiming it was a life-or-death emergency regarding our new construction bid. My stomach tightened. "He told you?" "He did." Victor nodded. "He was very eloquent. He told me that a young woman named Jean Webb might attempt to enter the building. He warned me that you are a pathological liar and a thief. He claimed you were fired from his company for embezzling funds and that you are currently, how did he put it? Suffering from a break with reality." I looked down at my hands. "I am sorry. I didn't want to bring this drama to your doorstep." "John," Victor interrupted, his voice sharp. "Look at me." I looked up. "He called the CEO of a financial firm to accuse a 6% shareholder of theft." Victor let that sink in. "Do you understand the implication? He wasn't just slandering his daughter. He was slandering one of my bosses. He was telling me that a woman who technically pays part of my salary is a criminal." A slow realization began to dawn on me. My father thought he was crushing a bug. He didn't realize he was punching a tank. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "I told him nothing," Victor said. "I listened. I took notes. And I thanked him for the information. He thinks he has successfully blocked you. He thinks you are going to be escorted out by security the moment you step into the lobby. He is probably at home right now, celebrating." Victor slid a folder across the desk. "Your grandmother's instructions were clear," he said. "She didn't just want you to have the money. If she wanted that, she would have just given you cash. She wanted you to have a position. She wanted you to be safe." I opened the folder. It was an employment contract. Position, senior analyst, internal control and compliance division. Reporting to, chief financial officer. Salary, a number that made my eyes water. It was more than my father made in 3 years. "I don't want to give you a job because you own the shares," Victor said. "That would be bad business. I want to give you a job because I looked at your college transcripts. I looked at the forensic work you did on your father's books. Yes, Evelyn sent me copies of your early work too. You have a talent for finding rot, Jean, and in this industry, that is a rare skill." He handed me a pen, a heavy, expensive fountain pen. "Your father thinks you are a liability," Victor said. "I think you are an asset, but I need to know one thing before you sign." "What?" "Are you ready to use this?" He tapped the employment contract. "This department, internal control, we audit everything. We audit our partners. We audit our vendors. We audit the companies that bid on our construction projects." I froze. Sterling and Vance was the client my father was trying to land. He was bidding on their new headquarters. That was the big contract he was so desperate for. The contract he needed to cover up the holes in his books. If I took this job, I wouldn't just be an employee. I would be the auditor on the other side of the table. I would be the one reviewing Webb Custom Foundation's application. "My father," I said slowly. "He is bidding on the West Side project." "He is," Victor confirmed, "and his application is currently sitting in the pile for financial review, a review that requires a deep dive into the applicant's solvency and historical ethics." Victor leaned back, a small, grim smile playing on his lips. "It would be a conflict of interest for you to review it. Of course," he said. Unless you were the most qualified person to identify the discrepancies." I looked at the contract. I looked at the wax seal on the desk. I looked at the letter from my grandmother. Love is not a leash. For 22 months, I had been the victim. I had been the girl who scrubbed floors and hid from the world. I had let him define me, but he had made a fatal error. He had assumed that money was the only form of power. He had forgotten about truth. And he had certainly forgotten about Evelyn Hart. I picked up the pen. The metal felt cold and solid in my hand. It felt like a weapon. "I am not just ready," I said. "I am overdue." I signed my name, Jean Webb. The signature looked different than it had on the motel receipts. It looked sharper, stronger. "Welcome to the firm, Miss Webb," Victor said, standing up and extending his hand. I shook it. His grip was firm. "Now," he said, checking his watch. "We have a shareholders' gala next week. It is a formal event. All our major partners will be there. The mayor, the press, and, of course, the finalists for the construction contract." "My father will be there," I said. "He has already RSVP'd, Victor said. "He is bringing your mother and your brother. He thinks he is coming to shake hands and seal the deal. He thinks he is coming to charm me." Victor walked to the window and looked down at the street, 45 stories below. "He has no idea that he is walking into a courtroom," Victor said, "and he has no idea that the judge is his daughter." I stood up. I walked to the window and stood next to him. I looked down at the city. It didn't look scary anymore. It looked like a board game. And for the first time, I was holding the dice. "He called me this morning," I said quietly. "He told me that if I didn't come home and sign his fraudulent papers, I would die in that motel. He said I had nowhere else to go." "He was wrong," Victor said. "Yes," I smiled. It felt strange on my face, like a muscle I hadn't used in years. "He was—" I touched the locket around my neck. "Mr. Lang?" "Call me Victor." "Victor, does the Internal Control Department have access to the archives? Specifically, the submitted financials for pending vendor applications?" "Full access," Victor said. "Why?" "Because," I said, "if my father is coming to a gala next week, I want to make sure I have my talking points ready. I have a feeling he is going to want to talk about family values." Victor laughed. It was a genuine, hearty sound. "I will have the files sent to your desk," he said. "Your office is down the hall. It is the one with the view." I walked out of the office. The receptionist nodded at me as I passed. A respectful nod this time. I walked down the corridor, my heels clicking on the marble, echoing the rhythm of a countdown. I wasn't Jean the maid. I wasn't Jean the thief. I was Jean Webb, owner of 6% of the Skyline, and I had a lot of work to do. The transition from the storage closet of the Starlight Inn to the 45th floor of the Sterling and Vance Tower was not just a change in altitude, it was a change in atmospheric pressure. For the first few days, I felt like a deep-sea diver brought to the surface too quickly. My ears popped, my heart raced. I kept expecting someone to tap me on the shoulder and tell me to go back to mopping the floor. But no one did. I had an office. I had a view of the Hudson River. I had an assistant named Sarah who brought me coffee and treated me with a deference that made me uncomfortable. And I had a badge that opened every door in the building. I spent those first 3 days immersed in the archives. I wasn't just learning the company. I was learning the battlefield. I studied the bid my father had submitted for the new headquarters project. It was a masterpiece of fiction. He had inflated his assets, hidden his liabilities in shell companies, and listed references that I knew for a fact were his drinking buddies. It was a house of cards, and I was holding the wind. On Thursday afternoon, Victor Lang walked into my office. He closed the door behind him. He looked different today, sharper, more intense. He was holding a sleek black folder. "The gala is set for Saturday night," he said, sitting on the edge of my desk. "The grand ballroom at the Pierre Hotel. 700 guests. The mayor will be there. The governor might stop by. And, of course, the finalists for the West Side contract." "My father," I said, looking up from a spreadsheet. "Your father." Victor nodded. "He confirmed his attendance an hour ago. He is bringing your mother and your brother. He requested a table near the front. He wants to be seen." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. The last time I saw them was in the diner, when they looked at me like I was something they had stepped in. "He thinks he is coming to a coronation," I said. "He thinks he has the contract in the bag." "He does," Victor agreed, "which is why we need to discuss the protocol for the evening. He opened the black folder. Inside was a run-of-show document. "I am going to make a speech at 8 o'clock," Victor said. "I will talk about the future of the firm. I will talk about integrity. And then, I want to introduce our newest senior analyst and key shareholder." He looked at me. "I want to introduce you, Jean." I froze. "Publicly?" "Very publicly," Victor said. "I want to bring you up on stage. I want to list your credentials. I want to acknowledge your ownership stake. I want to shine a spotlight so bright that the shadows your father cast over you will evaporate instantly." I stood up and walked to the window. The city looked peaceful from up here, a grid of gray and glass. But down there, in the streets, it was messy. "I don't know if I can do that," I whispered. "Why?" Victor asked. "Are you afraid of him?" "No," I said, and realized it was true. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I don't want to be cruel. If I do this, if I humiliate him in front of the entire town, in front of the people he tries so hard to impress, it will destroy him. I turned back to Victor. "I am not a vengeful person. Victor, I don't want to hurt them. I just want them to leave me alone. I want to live my life without looking over my shoulder. If I destroy him, am I any better than he is?" Victor looked at me with a softness I hadn't seen before. He stood up and walked over to where I was standing. "Jean," he said gently, "you are confusing revenge with justice. Revenge is throwing a brick through his window because you are angry. Justice is turning on the lights so everyone can see who threw the first brick." He gestured to the city below us. "Your father has spent 2 years destroying your reputation to save his own. He has lied to banks. He has lied to his community. He has lied to you. He is a man walking on a tightrope made of deceit. If you cut that rope, you are not killing him. You are just letting gravity do its job." He paused, letting the words sink in. "The truth is not a weapon, Jean. It is a mirror. If he looks into it and sees a monster, that is not your fault. That is his tragedy." I thought about the diner. I thought about the maroon vest. I thought about the way he had laughed when he told the stranger I was a failure. "Okay," I said. My voice was quiet but steady. "I will do it." "Good," Victor said. "Then you need to be ready. He won't go down quietly. He will try to spin it. He will try to make a scene. You need to have your armor on." I spent the next 24 hours building that armor. I went back to the safe in Victor's office and retrieved the documents my grandmother had left. I read the letter again. I read the trust deed. But there was one more item in the envelope that I hadn't fully examined yet. It was a small, leather-bound notebook. I sat in my office late into the night, the only light coming from my desk lamp, and opened it. It was a diary, Evelyn Hart's diary. I started reading, and the breath left my lungs. She hadn't just been watching. She had been recording. March 3rd, 2015. Raymond asked for a loan again. He says the concrete supplier raised prices. I called the supplier. Prices are flat. Raymond is gambling again. I refused him. He looked at me with eyes like a shark. July 10th, 2018. I saw Jean today. She looks thin. She showed me her report card. Straight A's. Raymond didn't even look at it. He was too busy teaching Grant how to hide income in the renovation budget. I have to protect her. I have to get the money out of here before he finds a way to forge my signature. August 12th, 2021. I am dying. I know it. Raymond knows it too. He is hovering. He brings me tea that tastes bitter. I have moved the assets. I have sent the letter to Victor. Raymond thinks I am just a confused old woman. He doesn't know I have documented every single time he forced Jean to sign a blank check. I turned the pages, my hands trembling. She had dates. She had amounts. She had conversations written down verbatim. This wasn't just a diary. This was a witness statement from the grave. She had known that one day it would be my word against his, and because she knew a young woman's word is often dismissed, she had given me her voice to amplify mine. I closed the book. I felt a strange sensation, not sadness, but a fierce, burning clarity. I wasn't fighting alone. She was in the room with me. I started to prepare what I would say. I didn't want a long speech. I didn't want to list his crimes one by one. That was for the lawyers. That was for the audit committee. For the stage. I needed something simpler. I stood in front of the glass reflection of my office window. I looked at the woman in the reflection, the tailored suit, the serious eyes. I am not a thief, I practiced saying. I am a witness. No, too defensive. My father lied. Too angry. I took a deep breath. I thought about the core of the pain, the betrayal. Is one mistake, I whispered to the glass, even if it were true, worth destroying your own child's life? That was the question. That was the dagger. I was ready. Then, the phone rang. It was 10:30 at night. The office was silent. The phone on my desk shrilled with a jarring, mechanical violence. I looked at the caller ID. Elaine Webb, my mother. I hadn't spoken to her since the day I walked out of the house. I hadn't answered her calls when I was at the motel. But tonight, the night before the end of the world, I picked up. Hello, Mother. Jean? Her voice was breathless, frantic. Oh, thank God. I have been calling and calling. Your phone. It goes straight to voicemail. I have a new number, I said. How did you get this one? I called the main switchboard, she said. I told them it was a family emergency. Jean, please, you have to come home. I am not coming home. You don't understand, she cried. Your father, he is in a state. The audit is starting on Monday. He is tearing the house apart looking for files. He is shouting. He is terrified. Jean, he says if we don't get this contract with Sterling and Vance, the bank is going to foreclose on everything. The house, the trucks, everything. I know, I said. You know? She paused. Then why aren't you helping? You can fix this. He says you just need to sign a few papers. Just come back for the weekend. We can sort it out. Please, Jean, do it for me. I can't handle him when he is like this. I closed my eyes. I felt a pang of the old guilt, the conditioned response to fix her pain. She was the damsel, and I was supposed to be the shield. Mom, I said, do you know what he did to me? He was angry. She dismissed it quickly. He says things he doesn't mean. You know how he is. He told every employer in town I was a thief, I said. He forced me to scrub toilets for 2 years. He tried to starve me into submission. That isn't anger, Mom. That is malice. He is your father, she shrieked. He gave you life. And he tried to take it back, I said calmly. Jean, listen to me. Her voice dropped to a desperate whisper. We are coming to the city tomorrow, for the gala. It is a big night. If you cause a scene, if you embarrass him, he will never forgive you. You will make him lose face in front of all those important people. I looked down at my grandmother's diary on the desk. I ran my hand over the leather cover. Mom, I said, I am not trying to make him lose face. Then what are you doing? I am trying not to lose my life, I said. I am trying to save the only thing I have left, my name. He will destroy you, she sobbed. If you fight him, he will crush you. He always wins. Jean, you know he always wins. Not this time, I said. Jean, goodbye. Mom, I will see you at the gala. I hung up the phone. My hand was shaking, but not from fear. It was shaking from the adrenaline of finally cutting the cord. She had made her choice. She had chosen the lie because it was comfortable. She had chosen the abuser because he paid the mortgage. I could not save her. I could only save myself. I left the office and took a cab to the temporary apartment Victor had arranged for me. It was a sterile, corporate suite, but it was clean, and it was mine. I laid my outfit for the next night on the bed. It wasn't a suit. It was a dress Victor's stylist had pulled for me. It was a deep, midnight blue, the color of a bruise healing into strength. It was elegant, severe, and undeniably powerful. It was not the dress of a junior analyst. It was the dress of a majority shareholder. I placed the envelope next to it, the letter, the stock certificate, the diary. I turned off the lights and stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. I felt a presence in the room. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't a spooky chill. It was a warmth. It was the smell of lavender and menthol cigarettes. I remembered the day on the porch when I was 14. If you are ever doused to the wall, find the door I left. I had found the door. I had unlocked it. And tomorrow night, I was going to walk through it, and I was going to bring the whole house down behind me. I slept that night. For the first time in 22 months, I slept without dreaming of mops or invoices or my father's shouting. I slept the deep, dreamless sleep of a soldier the night before the war finally ends. When I woke up, the sun was shining. It was Saturday, the day of the reckoning. The grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was a cavern of gold leaf and crystal. 700 people filled the space, a sea of black tuxedos and designer gowns that shimmered under the light of chandeliers that looked like frozen fireworks. The air smelled of expensive perfume, champagne, and the very specific, metallic scent of aggressive ambition. I stood at the top of the velvet-carpeted staircase, looking down at the crowd. I was wearing the midnight blue dress. It fit like a second skin, moving with me, a stark contrast to the baggy polyester vest I had worn for the last 22 months. My hair was swept back. I wore no jewelry except for the small, silver locket around my neck. I did not feel like Jean the maid. I did not feel like Jean the disappointment. I felt like the blade of a guillotine hanging in the silence before the drop. I scanned the room. It did not take long to find them. My father, Raymond Webb, was holding court near the center of the room, right by the ice sculpture. He was wearing a new tuxedo, the satin lapels catching the light. He was laughing, his head thrown back, a glass of scotch in his hand. He looked magnificent. He looked like a man who had already won. My mother stood beside him, smiling that tight, practiced smile she used to cover up the cracks in our lives. And Grant was there, looking slightly uncomfortable in a suit that was too tight around the shoulders, scanning the room for waitresses to harass. They looked so complete without me. They looked as if they had successfully scrubbed the stain of my existence from their portrait. I walked down the stairs. I moved through the crowd with a fluidity I didn't know I possessed. Waiters stepped out of my way. Guests parted to let me through, their eyes lingering on the dress, wondering who I was. I wasn't wearing a name tag. I didn't need one. I stopped in the shadow of a large floral arrangement, just 10 feet away from my family. I wanted to hear them. My father was talking to a group of local investors, and to my surprise, he had cornered Victor Lang. Victor stood there, holding a glass of mineral water, his face an unreadable mask of polite interest. My father was leaning in close, invading his personal space, using his physical size to dominate the conversation. The West Side project is just the beginning. Victor, my father was saying, his voice booming with false conviviality. Webb Custom Foundations is ready to scale. We have the manpower, we have the equipment, and most importantly, we have the stability. We are a family operation, no corporate red tape. Is that so? Victor asked, his voice cool. Family is important to you. Raymond? It is everything, my father declared, placing a hand on his heart. That is why my clients trust me. I run my business like I run my home, with discipline, with order. He took a sip of his drink and shook his head theatrically. Although, sadly, not everyone appreciates that discipline. You know, I have a daughter, Jean. Breaks my heart to mention it. But since we are going to be partners, I believe in full disclosure. I watched Victor's eyes flicker toward the shadows where I was standing, but he didn't give me away. Oh? Victor said. The daughter you called me about? The same, my father sighed, looking at the floor as if burdened by a great sorrow. Brilliant girl, but troubled, got involved with the wrong crowd, started borrowing money from the petty cash. Then it got worse. We had to let her go. She is currently working as a maid in a roadside motel. Refuses to come home and get treatment. My mother nodded sadly beside him. We pray for her every day. I told her, my father continued, his voice regaining its strength. I said, Jean, until you are ready to be honest, you are on your own. I cannot have a thief in my house, and I certainly cannot have one in my business. Integrity is my bottom line. Victor. Integrity. The word hung in the air. Sickeningly sweet. Victor nodded slowly. He checked his watch. That is a very moving story, Raymond, Victor said. It is rare to see a father so committed to his principles. I try, my father said humbly. If you will excuse me, Victor said. It is 8 o'clock. It is time for the keynote. Victor walked away toward the stage. My father turned to his group of sycophants, beaming. I think he likes me. Did you see that? We are in. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. A spotlight hit the podium on the stage. The murmur of 700 conversations died down to a hush. Victor stepped up to the microphone. He looked commanding, the undisputed king of this concrete jungle. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, welcome. Tonight is about the future. It is about building legacies that last. But a legacy is not built on steel and glass alone. It is built on trust. It is built on the truth. He paused. He looked out into the darkness of the room. We have many partners here tonight, many hopefuls who wish to build our new headquarters. We vet our partners carefully. We look at their balance sheets. We look at their history. And sometimes, we look at who they leave behind. My father was nodding in the front row, thinking this was a speech about him. I have the distinct pleasure tonight, Victor continued, of introducing a new member of our executive leadership team, a woman who has shown a level of forensic brilliance and moral courage that is rare in our industry. She has joined us as the senior analyst for internal control and compliance. My father frowned slightly. He whispered something to my mother. Furthermore, Victor's voice rose, cutting through the room. It is my duty to acknowledge her as a majority stakeholder. Under the terms of the Evelyn Hart Trust, she is the owner of 6% of Sterling and Vance Global Partners. My father froze. His face went slack. Please welcome, Victor said, pointing a hand toward the stairs. Ms. Jean Webb. The spotlight swung. It hit me. I took a breath that filled my lungs with cold. Clear resolve. I stepped out of the shadows. I walked toward the stage. The clicking of my heels on the parquet floor was the only sound in the room. As I walked past the front table, I saw them. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Grant dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against his china plate. And my father, he looked as if he had seen a ghost. His face drained of color, turning a sickly, ash gray. He stared at me, at the dress, at the confidence, at the way I held my head high. I walked up the stairs to the stage. I stood next to Victor. I looked out at the blinding lights, and then past them, to the face of the man who had tried to bury me. Thank you, Victor, I said into the microphone. My voice did not shake. It was strong. It was my grandmother's voice. It is an honor to be here, I said. And it is an honor to finally claim what is mine. For 3 seconds, there was silence. Then, my father stood up. It wasn't a dignified rise. He scrambled up, knocking his chair over. The crash echoed through the silent ballroom. No, he shouted. He pointed a shaking finger at the stage. This is a mistake. This is a fraud. Security guards took a step forward, but Victor held up a hand to stop them. He wanted the room to see this. Raymond? Victor asked calmly into the mic. Is there a problem? She is a thief, my father screamed, his face turning purple. She is a liar. She is a maid at a motel. She doesn't own anything. She is mentally unstable. He looked around at the shocked guests, desperate to pull them into his reality. Don't listen to her, he yelled. She embezzled from my company. I fired her. She is trying to con you. He turned back to me, his eyes wild. Get off that stage. Jean, Get down here right now. You are embarrassing the family. I stood still. I didn't flinch. I let him scream. I let him show everyone exactly who he was. Victor leaned into the microphone. His voice was dangerously soft. Mr. Webb, Victor said, we have conducted a full forensic audit of your company's books as part of your application, and we have compared them with the personal records provided by Ms. Webb, as well as the diaries of the late Evelyn Hart. My father stopped screaming. The name Evelyn Hart hit him like a physical blow. We found the embezzlement, Victor continued, his voice cold. We found the shell companies. We found the duplicate invoices, and we found that the signatures authorizing them were not Jean's. They were yours. A gasp rippled through the room. That is a lie, my father sputtered, sweat beading on his forehead. Those records are private. You have no right. And regarding your claim that Ms. Webb is a thief, Victor interrupted, I have the logs of the phone calls you made to me, and to every other employer in Oakhaven. Slander is a serious offense, Raymond, especially when you direct it at a major shareholder of the firm you are asking for money. My father looked around. He saw the faces of the mayor, the bankers, the investors. They weren't looking at him with respect anymore. They were looking at him with disgust. He was drowning, and he knew it. In his panic, he did the one thing he should never have done. He tried to bargain. I had to do it, he blurted out. She wouldn't listen. I had to stop her. He pointed at me, his hand trembling. I am her father. I know what is best. She wouldn't sign the papers. I needed her to sign the historicals for the bank. If she didn't sign, we would lose the loan. I had to teach her a lesson so she would come back and do her duty. The silence that followed was absolute. He had just admitted it. He had admitted to the blackmail. He had admitted to the coercion. He had admitted that the thievery was a fabrication designed to force me back into his fraud. He realized what he had said a second too late. He clamped his mouth shut, looking around wildly, but the damage was done. The truth was out, naked and ugly, standing in the middle of the ballroom. My mother put her head in her hands. Grant was staring at the table, wishing he could dissolve. I stepped forward to the microphone. I looked down at him. He looked so small now. The tuxedo didn't make him a king anymore. It just made him a clown. I am not a thief, Dad, I said. My voice echoed through the hall, calm and final. And I am not your shield. I looked at the 700 people in the room. For 2 years, my father told you I was unemployable. He told you I was dangerous. He did this because I refused to put my name on a lie. He did this because I refused to go to prison for his crimes. I looked back at him. I am not here to ruin you, I said. You did that yourself the moment you decided your profit was worth more than your daughter. I am here to set the record straight. I will not come home. I will not sign your papers. And I will not live my life by your permission ever again. I stepped back. For a moment, nobody moved. Then, slowly, the mayor stood up. He turned his back on my father. Then the banker from Oakhaven stood up and turned away. Then the investors, one by one. The room turned its back on Raymond Webb. It was a silent, devastating verdict. The social contract was broken. He was finished. My father stood there, alone in the middle of the crowd. He looked at me, his mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. He looked at my mother, but she wouldn't look up. He looked at Grant, but Grant was already edging away from the table, distancing himself from the wreckage. Security guards moved in quietly, not to drag him out, but to form a wall between him and the stage. Victor turned to me. He smiled. Well done, Jane, he whispered. The applause started slowly. It wasn't the polite applause of a gala. It was the applause of people who had just witnessed a dragon being slain. It grew louder and louder until it filled the cavernous room. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just nodded. I walked off the stage. I didn't go back to the table. I didn't go to my parents. I walked straight down the center aisle, toward the exit doors. I could feel my grandmother walking beside me. I could feel the weight of the locket against my chest. I wasn't walking out as a victor. I wasn't walking out as a victim. I was walking out as Jean Webb. I pushed open the heavy double doors of the ballroom and stepped out into the cool night air of the city. The noise of the party faded behind me. I took a deep breath. It smelled of exhaust and rain and asphalt. It smelled like freedom. I hailed a cab. I didn't know where I was going next. Maybe back to the office to finish the audit. Maybe to get a slice of pizza. It didn't matter. The cage was open, and I was flying. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop your location in the comments below so we can connect. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more revenge drama, please subscribe to the Nina Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit the hype button to help this story reach even more people.